Winter in Bridgeport made the outdoors inhospitable, especially for fishing. Unless, of course, you were a die-hard angler who'd happily cast a line in a blizzard. Judge Cole, however, was not that kind of fisherman, and no one would dare let a retired federal judge sit in the freezing cold for half a day. That's what made Professor Hoffman's glass-walled sunroom the perfect solution. Sunlight streamed in, a discreet heating system kept the air comfortable, and a humidifier maintained the perfect moisture level. Outside, a river flowed past the edge of the property, its far bank lined with tall, bare trees. The thick lawn had faded to a wintry yellow, but you could still feel the life dormant within it, waiting for spring. An old grapefruit tree in the yard still held a few pieces of fruit, unpicked globes of pale yellow that gave the scene a feeling of forgotten harvest. When Leo and Alex arrived, Judge Cole had just gotten there. The sunroom was immaculate, a feat accomplished not by Professor Hoffman himself, but by a cleaner following his detailed verbal instructions. The only things the professor touched were his prized tea table and his cigar cabinet. Left to his own devices for an afternoon, he could turn the room into what looked like a fraternity common room after a party. But when you're wealthy enough, you don't have to get annoyed at your husband for leaving his socks on the floor or scattering peanut shells everywhere. You just hire someone to clean it up. Penelope Hayes had never once nagged her husband about his untidiness, just as Victoria Vance never chided her billionaire husband for clipping his toenails on the living room rug. Leo had brought the fish, the frost pears, and a roommate. The last one wasn't a gift. Judge Cole fancied himself a skilled fisherman, and Professor Hoffman was a connoisseur of all leisurely pursuits. Both were intrigued by the wild sea bass Alex carried in a large bucket. It was still very much alive. The hallmarks of a wild fish were obvious. It was long and lean, and its scales, especially near the tail, were slightly battered from the rigors of surviving in the open water. A fish this large, caught in the dead of winter, was a rare prize. Today's catch was even bigger than yesterday's. Leo didn't try to split the credit. My roommate, Alex Young, brought it, he said, framing it as a gift from Alex. Then he presented the frost pears. These are from an older relative of mine. They need to go in the freezer. They'd be perfect for an afternoon snack. He hadn't brought any tea for the judge. He still had some of the rare batch he'd gotten from old Mr. Preston, but some instinct told him it wasn't necessary here. His current level of intelligence just told him not to. Perfect, Professor Hoffman declared. I've got some excellent lamb. Fish and lamb, the very essence of freshness. The professor instructed the cleaner on how to handle the pears. He told her not to slice them, but to place each one in a bowl with a small spoon and a straw. As for the fish, Leo announced that he would take care of it. He was planning to steam it, and the process, in his mind, began with the selection of the fish and included the art of dispatching it. Perhaps, he mused, a fish that dies a stressful death yields less sweetmeat. When Alex first arrived, Leo could sense a slight tension in him, a holding back that was absent from his usual easygoing confidence. Anyone who didn't know him well wouldn't have noticed, but once Alex started helping carry the bowls for the pears, the stiffness vanished. In a matter of moments, he was completely at ease, chatting naturally with both Professor Hoffman and Judge Cole. He laughed, told jokes, and never let the conversation lag. He didn't need the older men to cater to him by sticking to familiar topics. He could jump into any subject, demonstrating a wide breadth of knowledge without ever becoming boastful. When he didn't know something, he listened intently and sincerely thanked them for the insight. Watching Alex, Leo felt like he was taking a master class in conversation. He, on the other hand, was not a natural conversationalist. Even with his intelligence stat boosted, his real-world knowledge and experience hadn't caught up. It was like a high IQ farmer inventing a steamship long after they'd already become commonplace. So Leo retreated to what he was good at. He quietly went to the tea table. In any situation, sticking to your strengths is the best way to feel comfortable. Better than forcing himself to interject, saying something awkward, and making everyone uncomfortable without even knowing what he'd done wrong. With Judge Cole present, Leo knew the professor would bring out his best teas. Just getting to sample them was a win. He prepared the tea with a practiced, fluid grace that felt entirely intuitive. He enjoyed the first sip himself before pouring for the others. Ah, Professor Hoffman sighed after a taste. That's the stuff. Perfect. Judge Cole took a sip and nodded in quiet approval. Alex drank his portion seriously, a wave of melancholy washing over him. He felt like he could weep into a bowl of instant ramen. A tea this exquisite. After graduation, he might never have the chance to drink something like it again. It was a stark reminder that he had to keep pushing, keep striving. The combination of fine tea and conversation among 3 generations, old, middle, and young, made the time pass effortlessly. Sunlight, a beautiful view, good company. In an age of constantly bowed heads and glowing screens, simply being present felt like you were getting time back. Professor Hoffman lamented the state of many students today. They're so lost. They drift through their classes with no idea what they want to study, no ambition for the future. It's just clocking in for lectures, then back to their phones. Day after day of pure apathy. That was me, Leo thought. He's describing my entire life before the system. Alex agreed. It's true for a lot of them. And these are smart kids. Just getting into college puts them in the top 20%. You give them a task in student government, and most of them do a fantastic job. They're responsible. They have a sense of community. I think maybe we need more focus on mental and emotional health. It's not like it was in the past, when people had this inherent sense of duty and pressure. Now, with the information explosion, young people are bombarded with so many conflicting ideas. They need guidance. Judge Cole nodded. Though he didn't interact with students much anymore, he kept up with the news. He mentioned a recent string of teen suicides in another state. The psychological support systems aren't strong enough. It's something that needs to be taken seriously. The conversation flowed, meandering from one topic to the next. Leo steeped 2 rounds of tea and then ate one of the frost pears. The flesh had the texture of a sorbet, and the juice, which he sucked up through a straw, was a perfect sweet-tart blend that made his mouth water. They were huge. Judge Cole ate about half of his before Leo had the bowl taken away, knowing it was best not to overdo it. Professor Hoffman stopped as well, complaining that it made his teeth cold, but admitted it was incredibly refreshing. Penelope would love this, he said to Leo. She was filming up north once, and said she had an authentic frozen pear that was just divine. Alex and Leo finished theirs. Leo explained where the pears came from and briefly mentioned that Dr. Shun had taken him on as an apprentice. He touched on having done a massage for one of his godfather's elderly patients, but didn't elaborate. They didn't press for details. As the sky began to darken, Leo decided it was time to prepare the fish. Professor Hoffman accompanied him to the kitchen, leaving Alex with Judge Cole. If it had been Sean left alone with the judge, he probably would have been so nervous his hair would stand on end. But Alex was like a mouse who'd fallen into a cheese cellar. He was genuinely thrilled. An opportunity to chat with a man of this stature, to soak up any bit of wisdom, was an invaluable learning experience. Not to mention, it was a chance to build a deeper connection. Leo remembered the new culinary tonic skill he'd acquired. While the others were talking, he'd messaged his godfather, Dr. Shun, asking for a simple, everyday recipe. Dr. Shun, delighted by his apprentice's enthusiasm, had replied almost instantly, though not without a word of caution. Leo had sent him a barrage of questions early that morning, a clear sign of another late night studying. Don't work yourself so hard, the doctor had warned. Dr. Shun had sent a detailed list of therapeutic soups. Lamb and ginger stew with rosemary. Warms the core, promotes circulation, and nourishes the blood. Excellent for those who often have cold hands and feet. Go easy on the ginger if you tend to run hot. Immunity-boosting chicken broth with astragalus. Boosts energy, strengthens the spleen, and enhances the immune system. Perfect for those who feel constantly fatigued or catch colds easily. I'm making this tomorrow, Leo thought. Spiced oat porridge with dates and cinnamon. Soothes the stomach, calms the mind, nourishes the blood and heart, improves sleep. Especially good for women and those feeling run down. Bone broth with walnuts and black beans. Strengthens the kidneys, enhances essence, and improves memory. Ideal for those suffering from mental exhaustion or weakness in the lower back and knees. This one is for me, Leo decided. My back is fine, but the mental exhaustion is real. Ginger date tea. Simple to make, takes 15 minutes. A daily drink to ward off cold, warm the stomach, and alleviate winter chills or menstrual cramps. The information Dr. Shun sent was more reliable than anything you could find online. Since Professor Hoffman had mentioned good lamb, Leo decided to try the lamb and ginger stew. The last tonic tea he'd made for the judge had been for energy and circulation, and he'd liked it, so this was probably a safe bet. His skill ensured it wouldn't be poisonous. He followed his godfather's recipe to the letter. 1 pound of lamb, a sprig of rosemary, a 30-gram knob of ginger, 5 dates, and a sprinkle of goji berries. Professor Hoffman, being a man who took care of himself, had all the ingredients on hand, and they were all top quality. The process was simple. Blanch the lamb to remove any gaminess, then combine all the ingredients in a clay pot, cover with water, bring to a boil, and simmer for an hour and a half. Salt at the end. That was it. Leo followed the instructions perfectly. If it didn't taste good, it was the lamb's fault. It was Leo's first time making a culinary tonic. For some people, Making a delicious soup was effortless, like alchemy. For those who know the secret, it's simple. For those who don't, it's impossible. The masters just toss what they need into a pot, and it turns to gold. The novices measure every gram, time every minute, watch every flame, and somehow the pot still burns. Watching Leo move with such casual confidence, Professor Hoffman pegged him as a master. As they worked in the kitchen, the professor's curiosity got the better of him. He started asking about Leo's trip with his godfather to see the big shot. He wasn't prying into the man's health, of course. The physical condition of such a powerful figure had little bearing on the lives of ordinary people. He was curious about the other details, the experience itself. He was like a reader hungry for a good story, wanting to learn something new, to gain a new perspective. Leo had been dying to talk about it. He wanted to tell his roommates, but in a room of 4, there are no secrets. It would be like posting it online. And he couldn't talk to Stella about certain things, his own curiosity, his nervousness. A guy had to maintain a certain image in front of his girlfriend. But Professor Hoffman had always struck him as a gentle soul, a master of encouragement who could make anyone feel comfortable. More importantly, the professor was discreet. He never gossiped, never started a sentence with, "You won't believe what my friend so-and-so did." Even though he knew Judge Cole well, he rarely mentioned it. Leo felt a deep sense of trust, the kind a student has for a mentor. He opened up completely. The first time I went, it was so disorienting. The drive felt like we were going through a maze. We circled around and around, but I don't think we ever went that far from where we started. It was very surreal. Probably some kind of special security protocol, Professor Hoffman supplied. Makes the journey feel longer than it is. Inside, the air was perfectly climate-controlled, Leo continued. It almost felt like it made my brain clearer, like I was smarter just by being in the room. It reminded me of the mystical caves in fantasy novels, the ones with heightened spiritual energy. Professor Hoffman had heard of such things. I bet it's an advanced air filtration system. I've heard some casinos in Vegas do that. They pump extra oxygen into the ventilation to keep people awake and their minds active. Leo gave the professor a thumbs up. He always knew how to connect the dots. The two of them, one old and one young, chatted and joked in the kitchen, with the professor even lending a hand here and there. Outside in the sunroom, the sun had set and the sky was growing dark. The lights inside cast a warm glow. Alex had taken over tea duties. His technique was average. He knew the mechanics, but lacked the artistry. But he was patient and, more importantly, he could maintain a lively conversation with Judge Cole while doing it. The truth was, since retiring, Judge Cole had grown a bit lonely. It's why he sought out Professor Hoffman's company. The moment he retired, his children started treating him like a fragile old man, worrying about his health, fussing over him like he was a sick patient or a toddler. They forgot that the day before he retired, he was still one of the sharpest legal minds in the country. It was a frustrating shift in perspective. The psychological struggles of the young and the old weren't so different. But talking with this young man today, the judge felt as if he were back on the bench, mentoring a promising young clerk who was diligently seeking his counsel. He felt that his words were being heard, recorded, and valued, that they might even be acted upon. The more they talked, the more impressed he became. A feeling of wanting to nurture this young talent began to grow within him. Of course, his retired status softened his perspective. If he were still working, his evaluation would be different, stricter, more demanding. But now, he could afford to be more generous in his assessment of the younger generation. It was also clear that the boy came from a family of public servants. The difference was quite distinct. There are administrators and there are officials. An administrator is focused on execution, on doing a job, on managing their own small patch of turf without a broader, macroscopic view. But to be an official, one's vision must be far-reaching. You can't be fixated on the perks of a single position, but must think in terms of the bigger picture. What can I accomplish for the people in this role? How can I grow? What is the next step? This young man, though only a senior in college, already thought beyond the level of an administrator. He had vision, but it was grounded in reality, not empty rhetoric. Listening to him describe his studies and his work, it was clear he was serious, taking things one step at a time. The judge liked Leo, finding him an interesting, kind, and amusing young man, like one of his own grandsons. And now, seeing the friend Leo had brought along, he was equally impressed. The two had entirely different temperaments, but both were solid. Naturally, the conversation turned to Leo. Alex, ever the diplomat, never spoke ill of anyone behind their back. Instead, he praised them. If someone was impulsive, he'd say they were clever and quick-witted. If they were slow, he'd say they were steady and patient. After all, wasn't someone who could remain calm, while everyone else was panicking, the very definition of patient. In front of Judge Cole, he praised Leo with utter sincerity. Leo's the youngest in our dorm, but he's the most sincere person I know. He gets along with everyone. Our oldest roommate, Sean, comes from a more modest background, and Leo is especially good to him. He's soft-hearted and kind. He studies hard every single day, so disciplined. He's won awards for his painting and his tea ceremony. He has millions of followers on TikTok, but he's still in a study hall or the library every day, and he never misses his morning run. He lives a simple life. He's just a genuinely good person. Being around him, you feel at ease, and you can't help but feel inspired to be better yourself. The judge nodded. No wonder he'd taken such a liking to Leo. The boy's sincerity was palpable, and a man is known by the company he keeps. This friend of Leo's was just as reliable, ambitious, pragmatic, and intelligent. The old man and the young man chatted happily. Alex's blend of sincerity and familiarity with the ways of the powerful created a unique dynamic, giving the judge both the energy of youth and the pleasant, nostalgic feeling of mentoring a promising subordinate. Meanwhile, Leo and Professor Hoffman finished preparing the fish. They had it ready for the steamer, but wouldn't start it until the lamb stew was nearly done. The cleaner was busy with the other dishes. Before dinner, the professor led the judge on a tour of his small collection in the basement. It was a pre-meal constitutional, a way to clear the stomach and whet the appetite for the feast to come. It wasn't a collection of antiques for the most part, but of props and memorabilia from Penelope's films. The basement in this housing complex was unusually tall. Some neighbors had split it into 2 levels, but the professor had left his as a single, high-ceiling space that felt open and airy. With light coming in from both ends, it wasn't stuffy at all. The collection was vast, filled with props from various sets, some from iconic scenes, each piece radiating a sense of history. For every item his wife brought home, Professor Hoffman had meticulously created a small plaque explaining which movie it was from, which scene, its function, and its historical period. Walking through, it felt less like a cluttered basement and more like a private museum. To have a husband like that, who would take a reed you picked by the river, write an essay about it, and display it like a work of art. How could you not love him? Professor Hoffman is the absolute T of trophy husbands, Leo thought. His game is on another level. The tour was like a walk through the history of modern American cinema. By the time they were done, they had logged nearly 2,000 steps. It was Professor Hoffman declared, time for dinner. The lamps were lit as dusk settled. Penelope Hayes rushed home just in time for dinner. She generally avoided networking events, preferring to eat at home whenever possible, though the frantic pace of filming often made that impossible when she was on location. Her voice was loud, a habit ingrained from years of shouting directions on set. Her arrival instantly made the house feel more boisterous, as if a crowd had just walked in. Seeing Leo again, Penelope was overjoyed. Leo, you were our lucky charm. The shoot went incredibly smoothly, and we even got another investor to kick in more funding. We might move up the release date. They had originally been targeting a holiday release, sometime in January or February. A serious historical drama was perfect for family viewing. Television ratings weren't what they used to be, but the data was still meaningful. The decision to release early was driven not just by the smooth production, but also by the constant potshot from their rival, director Ian Shaw. Shaw was also making a historical drama, but with the marketing sensibilities of a web series, constantly leaking behind-the-scenes clips of muscular men and tough guys. His promotional stills were pure clickbait. In this regard, Penelope was a bit too old school, and her show's marketing suffered for it. Shaw's strategy was to latch onto her project, using it for his own promotion. It was a classic tactic. It was like with boy bands. Manufacturers of pop culture would invent drama, claiming one member was bullying another, creating constant comparisons to evoke sympathy and force fans to take sides. Once you felt indignant on someone's behalf, you'd subconsciously join their team. Penelope wasn't afraid of a direct confrontation. She just found it annoying. So she decided on a bold move: release her first installment early. If it did well, they could film a sequel. I have a lot of confidence in this show, she said, looking at Leo. Especially your character. Filming your scenes was a joy. Based on my years of experience, I guarantee audiences will remember your character. Leo, would you be interested in a role in my new project? Leo had no interest in acting. It was too complicated, too stressful, too superficial. Before he could figure out how to politely decline, Alex jumped in enthusiastically. Director Hayes, what about me? Give me a role. I got a righteous look, perfect for playing one of those noble, heroic types. Penelope looked at the bright, cheerful young man with his square jaw and high forehead. He did indeed have a wholesome, all-American look, but she could tell he was joking. She playfully tapped his forehead. Your face is too prime time. Thank you for the compliment, ma'am. Alex beamed. Dinner was a feast. Leo contributed the steamed fish and the lamb and rosemary soup. He served the soup while Alex portioned out the fish. Serving fish was an art. Alex first took the delicate meat from behind the gills and placed it on Judge Cole's plate. Then he served the belly meat to Penelope, followed by a piece for Professor Hoffman. He gave a portion to Leo and, finally, took some for himself. There are different parts to serve? Leo thought. This is way too complicated. If it were up to me, I'd just give a bony piece to whoever complained the most. Here, you want some? Have some bones. He was glad he claimed soup duty. Judge Cole tried the soup first. On a cold day, it looked particularly appetizing. The sweetness of the lamb was still present, and the rosemary and ginger didn't create an overpowering medicinal flavor. Instead, they perfectly balanced the slight gaminess of the meat. A bowl of it on a winter evening was enough to warm you from the inside out. Penelope, who was often run down from her demanding work schedule, felt the warmth spread to her fingertips. Professor Hoffman, a true foodie, savored the lamb itself, a tender cut from the rack, with a perfect ratio of fat to meat. But the steamed fish was on another level entirely. The flesh of the wild fish was firm and springy. Leo had somehow managed to preserve its natural sweetness, and the soy sauce was seasoned just right, creating a flavor that lingered beautifully on the palate. Compared to the fish, the lamb soup was merely good. But for a culinary tonic, to taste this delicious was an achievement in itself. The meal was a resounding success, a gathering of happy hosts and contented guests. Good food and good drink have a way of cementing relationships, creating a bond that warms both the stomach and the heart. After dinner, they sat for a while. Penelope helped herself to one of the frost pears for a private dessert. Leo and the others had already had one that afternoon and passed, not wanting to overdo it with the icy treat. It was also possible that Professor Hoffman didn't want to make the judge too envious. As she ate, Penelope recounted the first time she'd seen them while filming in the Northwest. She'd spotted a local farmer on the roadside selling the frozen, blackened pears. Thinking they were rotten, she'd felt a pang of pity for the old man, imagining he'd been trying for days to sell his spoiled fruit. Young and idealistic, she couldn't bear to see such hardship, so she bought his entire basket of black pears, surprised when he charged her a rather high price. It was only later that she learned her mistake. The pears were meant to be eaten that way, a special local variety that turned black when frozen. I had a similar experience, Alex said. I was in a convenience store in New York one morning, buying breakfast. The line was long, and the old man in front of me was hard of hearing and fumbling with his money. I felt bad for him, thinking he might be struggling financially. I wanted to pay for him, but was afraid of being presumptuous. While I was hesitating, I heard the barista say, "Sir, your pour-over coffee will be ready in 2 minutes." I felt my face flush. Good thing I didn't do anything. An old man drinking pour-over coffee from a convenience store. That's a level of urban sophistication I can only dream of. I just buy the canned stuff. His story made everyone laugh. It was true. You'd see 80-year-old men in New York sipping artisanal coffee, a sight you wouldn't see in many other cities. Leo laughed along with them. He envied Alex's easy conversational style, his ability to chime in at the perfect moment, his broad range of experiences. He knew he couldn't be like that, but now he didn't feel inadequate about it. Everyone has their own place, their own strengths. He remembered a quote he'd once read in a book at the library. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Don't be trapped by dogma, which is living with the results of other people's thinking. Don't let the noise of others' opinions drown out your own inner voice. The words were from a Tim Cook commencement speech, and they had stuck with him. He used to try so hard to be like Alex, but he couldn't pull it off. Their backgrounds, their upbringings were too different. Forcing himself to act like Alex just made him feel like a clown. He could never chat up a professor with such ease. If he tried to force a compliment, the words would feel like stones in his mouth. The goal wasn't to imitate, but to improve, to find his own path and become the best version of himself. As it got dark, Leo and Alex said their goodbyes. They walked with Judge Cole back to his house first. Leo didn't receive a system notification about an increase in the judge's favorability, but that was normal. When you first meet someone, there's often a sharp increase, but then it plateaus. That plateau is like a testing period. After that, you might see another small increase, or even a decrease if you lose touch. Alex, however, had surely made a positive impression, and even without a system, he was definitely keeping his own mental ledger. Professor Hoffman had his driver, Walt, take them back to campus. As always, they didn't leave the professor's house empty-handed. This time, he gave them some high-end skincare products, gifts Penelope had received from actors she'd worked with. Penelope was a director focused on substance, not style, and had little need for expensive cosmetics. He told Leo and Alex to give them to the women in their families. He gave one set to Alex. Knowing the pairs had come from Leo's godmother, he gave 2 sets to Leo. Leo was clueless about skincare. Alex wasn't much better, but he sent a picture to their dorm group chat. Jordan, their resident expert, replied instantly. La Prairie. That's for rich ladies. A 20 milliliters serum costs like $1,700. They could just rob you at gunpoint, but instead, they give you a tiny bottle of lotion. Alex stared at the message. Is this what it feels like to be a trophy husband? I just hang out with Leo for an afternoon, eat some good food, and get sent home with a couple $1,000s worth of face cream? Leo. 1 set for my godmother, 1 for my mom. I have to tell mom to actually use it, not re-gift it. Do not re-gift it. A cool night breeze blew through the city. Inside the car, the temperature was perfect. Leo used to think Professor Hoffman's car was the most comfortable ride imaginable. But after the car provided by Adam Wright, Mr. Preston's assistant, he realized there were levels to this. The tycoons of the past may not have had modern technology, but they had perfected the use of people. No air conditioning? A servant would fan you. No massage chair? A servant would rub your legs. No TikTok thirst traps? A live dancer would perform for you. It made him wonder who was truly happier, us or the old masters of industry. When Judge Cole got home, his son, Jonathan, was waiting for him. Jonathan was surprised to find his father had been out. Since retiring, the old man seemed to be having a pretty good time. He'd heard he was at a neighbor's house, a university professor. That was reassuring. Once men get old, they become like children, and Jonathan, now well into middle age himself, had started to treat his father with the same cautious concern. He saw the old man return, looking quite pleased. Jonathan wanted to spend some time with him, but his father was immediately engrossed in his phone, completely ignoring him. Leo had sent the photos from the afternoon to their little group chat. As the judge scrolled through them, Jonathan glanced over his shoulder. He saw 2 young men in the pictures. A pang of guilt struck him. His own kids rarely came to visit their grandfather, complaining that he was too strict. Yet here he was, having a perfectly pleasant time with other young people. In the photos, his expression was remarkably soft. Dad, that young man is quite handsome. He looks familiar, Jonathan said. He's the one who painted my portrait, the judge replied. He was just in the Capitol for an art exhibition. Sold a painting for a few million. I never thought having my portrait done in my old age would be so profitable. Do you think this counts as a bribe? Does the ethics committee have rules about this? The judge just wanted to needle his son. For some reason, the sight of him made him want to pick a fight. A few sharp words always cleared the air. Jonathan was used to it. When he was younger, he'd argued with his father constantly. Then he'd had a son of his own and realized that a son was a blessing from heaven, specifically, a blessing designed for you to find fault with. After that, Jonathan had grown more patient with his father, perhaps fearing karmic retribution. Hearing his father's question, Jonathan felt a headache coming on. He couldn't tell if the old man was just trying to provoke him, setting him up with an impossible question, or genuinely asking him to help the young man. Is he a famous artist? Should I arrange an exhibition for him, or get him into the State Art Association? Before he could finish, a book came flying at his head. The judge was still exasperated. How did this guy get to his current position? His thinking was so linear, no sense of the big picture. Think it through properly before you speak again, the judge snapped. You're annoying me. Go home. Don't disturb my rest. He turned on his usual evening talk show, ready to relax. Jonathan Cole was treated as an honored guest everywhere he went, addressed respectfully as director. But in front of his father, he was dismissed like a child. As he left, he made a mental note to have his secretary investigate the young man his father had taken a liking to. If he wasn't prepared, he'd get an earful the next time he visited. The old man was getting older, and his memory for grudges was only getting sharper. Back in the dorm, Alex told his family group chat about his day, sending the photos with Professor Hoffman, Judge Cole, and Penelope Hayes. Director Young. Thumbs up Deputy Mayor Young. Thumbs up Director Young. Get some rest. We'll talk about your thoughts tomorrow, after you've had time to process. She knew her son was probably still buzzing with excitement. Alex sent a picture of the skincare set. Director Hayes gave me this. I think I was just benefiting from being with my roommate, Leo. It was meant for him, but I got a set too. Director Young. Then I'm benefiting too. We should think of a nice gift for your roommate. Nothing too direct. In a long-term relationship, you don't need to immediately repay every favor. A little bit of casual indebtedness on either side is what keeps things going. Deputy Mayor Young, your mother is right. Alex. Leo also updated his family group chats. He told his godmother he was sending her some skincare for the cold weather. She was delighted. She didn't need it, but it was the thought that counted. A gift from a son or daughter was always cherished. When Leo's mother, Tammy, heard how expensive the gift was, a present from a famous director that she'd received from a movie star, she got worried. Is it okay for you to accept something so valuable? The Fosters were ordinary, middle-class people. Their mindset hadn't fully caught up with their son's new reality. They didn't have the money in their own hands, and when they heard about his massive donation, they assumed it was some kind of publicity stunt that didn't really involve him personally. In their minds, their son was still the same simple, lazy kid who only got motivated when he needed money. It was a common mindset for people of their background. They'd pinch pennies over a few dollars, but couldn't comprehend sums in the hundreds of thousands or millions. It was like the old men who would walk an hour to save $1 on bus fare, but would then buy gold bracelets and even an apartment for a new girlfriend they met square dancing. Leo reassured his mom, "It's fine. The director really liked the role I played, and the professor likes me a lot." His parents were thrilled. To have their son be valued by his teachers was a sure sign he was on the right path. "I promise I won't give it away," Tammy declared grandly. "I'll use it myself." The moment she hung up, she sent the picture of the skincare set to her group chat with her sister-in-law and sister, with the caption, "Leo's professor's wife gave this to me. She insisted. I don't even know what it is." The group consisted of Leo's mother, his aunt, and his other aunt from his father's side. Leo's Aunt Melinda immediately replied, "Tammy, that's incredibly expensive. Our Leo is really making something of himself." His Aunt Sky sent a string of jealous lemon emojis. "That's one of the top luxury brands in the country." Tammy typed back, "I wouldn't know. Leo just said some movie star gave it to his professor's wife, the famous director." After a round of humble bragging, Tammy logged off. Her sister-in-law, Melinda, however, started thinking. That night, she brought it up with her parents, talking about her husband's nephew who seemed to be doing extraordinary things. Clay Foster, Leo's uncle, usually lived separately from his in-laws, but with the kids, it was easier to stay together. He often worked late at the lab and would come home to a cold dinner. Real life wasn't a TV show where a wife waits patiently with a hot meal. But tonight, when he got home, he found his in-laws had prepared a late-night snack for him. His mother-in-law had made him a restorative bird's nest and pigeon soup, saying he'd been working too hard. His father-in-law asked him if he was facing any difficulties at work. His wife's smile was warmer and more affectionate than it had been in months. Clay felt a prickle of anxiety. What did I do wrong? What happened? Then, as he was eating the soup, his wife casually mentioned his nephew Leo. Clay was a smart man. He understood instantly. He never thought the day would come when he'd be basking in the reflected glory of that punk kid, sipping a soup personally prepared by his mother-in-law. The torch has been passed, he thought with a sigh. The student has surpassed the master. Leo woke up and chugged a glass of honey water. The previous afternoon had been all about socializing and fine dining, but honestly, it was no less exhausting than a day of studying at the library. No wonder some people preferred to retreat into their own worlds. For most, social interaction was tiring, but you couldn't avoid it entirely. He'd also discovered a rule about waking up early. You had to be consistent. If you slept in once, it was incredibly hard to get back on track. Maintain the habit, and it's easy. Break it once or twice, and it becomes a struggle every morning. Even a powerhouse like Alex had failed at it. He joined Leo for morning runs a few times before giving up, defeated by the winter cold. The other key was getting to bed at a decent hour. Waking up early after sleeping late was a recipe for a heart attack. In the capital, a heart attack patient, Secretary Wu, was waking up. The surgery was over. The first thing he did was wiggle his fingers, slowly testing the joints. For a strange moment, his mind flashed to TV shows where coma patients always woke up by twitching a finger first. His body felt numb, a likely side effect of the procedure, but his mind was clear. That morning, after a nurse had checked his vitals, he was tasked with a new challenge. Stand up and walk 50 meters down a hallway. 3 times. He never thought the simple act of standing would one day feel like an act of immense courage. His wife supported him as he slowly made his way down the hall. In moments like these, their bond felt stronger than ever. They had stared into the abyss of loss and come back, leaving them with a mixture of profound gratitude and lingering fear. "Old mister, Preston sent one of his people to check on you while you were resting," she said. Yes, he breathed. I owe him for this. And that doctor of his. Dr. Shun. I took the liberty of asking him to stay. I was at my wit's end. I was so scared. You shouldn't have done that. You might have frightened him. I heard you stopped him at the airport. I'm sorry. I went to apologize and thank him properly after your surgery. I wasn't thinking straight, but given the circumstances. You're right. We do need to thank Dr. Shun, Secretary Wu conceded. He hadn't realized the danger himself. If he hadn't mentioned it to his wife beforehand, if they hadn't been paying attention, they would have missed the crucial window for treatment. His recovery would never have been this smooth. For your long-term treatment plan, she said, I want Dr. Shun to be involved. Don't worry about it, he said. I'll arrange it. Back in Bridgeport, Dr. Shun was getting restless. The conference in the capital was over, Secretary Wu was awake, and a long-term recovery plan would be a slow process. There wasn't much for a specialist in traditional medicine to do at this stage. Today, to his surprise, someone from an official organization had come to speak with him. Are they worried I'm bored? Dr. Shun thought. Trying to keep me entertained? They really don't have to. I've got questions for my apprentice to answer. That boy is so diligent, I can barely keep up. Official interviews were usually indirect, but technical experts could be stubborn, and Dr. Shun had a reputation for being particularly obstinate. The official got straight to the point. He asked if Dr. Shun would be willing to relocate to the capital. They could arrange a transfer, find positions for his family. Of course, he wouldn't be a hospital director, but they could give him his own department at one of the top medical centers. Dr. Shun refused. He couldn't get used to the food. The hand-pulled beef noodle soup wasn't authentic. Even the private chefs at Mr. Preston's house couldn't get it right. It lacked atmosphere. He liked going to a little shop, ordering, waiting in line, and carrying his own bowl, preferably filled to the brim so the broth sloshed over the side and chili oil splattered on the rim. He liked squeezing into a crowded space, watching people come and go. That was the essence of a lively city, and that's what made the noodles delicious. Besides, he wasn't short on money. The official had been prepared for this, having done his research. But this was where the state-sponsored career path for medical professionals got tricky. They couldn't just promote the old man. A promotion to a position at the Department of Health and Human Services would mean he'd have to give up his role as hospital director. The policy was designed to keep technical experts focused on their craft and prevent corruption. To advance a hospital leader, they had to take a different approach. Dr. Shun wasn't considering a move to the capital, at least not yet. Maybe if his godson needed something down the line, but Leo was still in college. What was a rush? The meeting ended without any clear resolution. What was the point of that? He wondered. Later that day, he was called to a consultation for the secretary. Dr. Shun had met many powerful people and was rarely fazed. In the face of illness, everyone was equal. But the sheer scale of the entourage in the capital was intimidating. Surrounded by a sea of specialists and officials, he felt like a tiny shrimp in an ocean of sharks. He assumed he'd be invisible. But during the consultation, among a crowd of doctors, the secretary singled him out to say hello. For a moment, he felt a strange sense of being favored. Must be my imagination, he thought. Great leaders are always personable. But after the meeting, he knew it wasn't his imagination. The secretary not only greeted him, but asked him to stay behind to talk. Dr. Shun felt a little awkward. The last time he'd seen this man, he'd been on a stage, giving a long, earnest speech. Now, lying in a hospital bed, he looked like a different person. The secretary's speech had been surprisingly practical, something that appealed to a technical-minded person like Dr. Shun. Feeling a renewed sense of duty, he couldn't help but recommend his mindful restoration technique again. The secretary's wife added him on a messaging app, and he sent her the video of Leo demonstrating the exercises. Old Mr. Preston and General Ingram both do this routine, he explained. The results have been very good. Once the secretary has recovered for a few days, perhaps in a week, he could try it. With that, his part in the immediate recovery plan was over. The other doctors were more than capable. It was just his directness that had put him in the spotlight, allowing him to claim the credit for saving the man's life. Dr. Shun was anxious to get back home. His own hospital was busy, and he'd been away too long. He didn't expect that when his plane landed back in Bridgeport, a delegation of local officials would be there to greet him. What is this, a state visit? He thought, startled, as a group of men in suits approached him as he deplaned. For a second, he thought they were arresting someone. He was flanked by 2 flight attendants and escorted down the stairs onto the tarmac. He took a deep breath of the dry, cold northwestern air, coughed twice, and was ushered into an executive shuttle van. Seated beside him was the state's lieutenant governor, who clapped him on the arm. Dr. Shun, you've really... Haha, you've done it this time. We got word from the top. They've approved a new branch for our university hospital. I'm in charge of the project, and I wanted to get your thoughts. The lieutenant governor was asking for his opinion on the plans for a new hospital wing, showing him blueprints where the location of his future office was already marked. What opinion could I have? Dr. Shen thought wryly. You've already drawn up the floor plans. So this was their solution. They couldn't promote him, so they expanded his territory instead. Meanwhile, Professor Reed was also getting off a plane from the capital. She took a deep breath. The air here was more humid, more comfortable. After collecting her luggage, she walked out to the arrivals area and saw a familiar face. Leo was standing at the pickup curb, waving with a huge smile. I told you to just send Walt, she said, her voice warm. You didn't have to come all this way. Walt, the driver, hurried over. Professor, I'm here. Let me get your bags. Leo took the professor's carry-on and handed her a travel mug filled with warm tea. She took a sip. It was a sweet ginger date tea. Well now, Leo, she chuckled. Your service is getting better and better. Leo just grinned. The truth was, he'd almost forgotten until Alex reminded him. He could have let the driver handle it. But Professor Reed had been insistent that he didn't need to come, which, in a way, made him feel he absolutely had to. It was a different feeling, arriving in a new city after a long journey and seeing a friendly face waiting for you. From an efficiency standpoint, it was unnecessary. But from an emotional one, it was essential. Seeing Leo, Professor Reed couldn't stop smiling. And sure enough, the mechanical voice in Leo's head chimed in. Congratulations, host. Your playbook for winning over the gold-tier bachelorette, Evelyn Reed, is showing some serious progress. Favorability has reached 79. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights. Leo saw Professor Reed safely home. The part-time cleaner had already been there, tidying the apartment, watering the plants, and airing out the rooms. When I walked in, the woman was on her hands and knees, wiping down the bottom shelf of a bookcase. She was working with a quiet diligence, a real person doing real work. She was in her 50s, wearing practical pants because skirts made her arthritic knees ache, and a high-neck shirt to keep the chill off her shoulders. When he was a freshman, Leo used to look at people doing manual labor with a kind of top-down pity, feeling sorry for how hard they worked for so little pay. Now, as a senior, he still felt pity, but it was for himself. That could be him one day. Pity the working class, then become the working class. The air in the apartment was fresh, filled with the familiar scent of plants. Leo told the professor to get some rest and that he would head back, but to call if she needed anything. She didn't let him leave empty-handed. I've had this for years, she said, handing him a pressed cake of tea. It's a good one. You can give it as a gift or drink it yourself. On the ride from the airport, Leo had mentioned that he might be meeting his girlfriend's parents soon. Professor Reed had just smiled. Now, she was giving him this. He felt a little embarrassed. All he'd done was pick her up, and he was getting such a valuable gift in return. He glanced at the wrapper. Chun Shanghao 2006 Lao Banzhong Ancient Tree Tea, 357G. He didn't recognize it and had no idea of its market value. But it was aged nearly 20 years from a named producer, and it was Lao Banzhong, which he knew was a prestigious origin. It had to be expensive, and coming from Professor Reed's private collection, it was guaranteed to be authentic. He thanked her, urged her again to rest, and left. Professor Reed sank into her favorite armchair with a sigh. At her age, travel was exhausting. She needed a moment. She had grown accustomed to this place, to the slightly humid air, the familiar furnishings of her small apartment, the view from her window. Returning home was a relief. The cleaner asked if she wanted some noodles. Professor Reed shook her head. She'd eaten on the plane. She gave the cleaner instructions for dinner. Then the woman went back to her work, leaving the professor in peace. The cleaner liked working for the old woman. She paid $5 an hour more than other clients, and, while her standards were high, she was clear and direct. You never had to guess what she wanted. Of course, the old lady was also sharp as a tack. The cleaner had once made a mistake on the grocery bill. The cashier had overcharged her, and the professor had caught it immediately. It had put the fear of God in her. Not that she ever intended to skim, but it was one thing when your employer was oblivious and another entirely when they knew what was what. Professor Reed chuckled to herself. What are you talking about? I was doing 3-digit multiplication in my head when I was 3 years old. She planned to rest for half an hour, then brew some fine tea and relax with the latest research paper on derivative calculus. After leaving, Leo sent a picture of the tea to Joy Run, who replied with a quote. Market price is around $5,000 to $7,000 per cake. The Chen Shanghao brand is special, They were the first to sign a complete contract for the ancient tea gardens in Banjong village. If you brew it, assuming it was stored in a dry warehouse, the steeped leaves should retain a fresh, dark green color. The aroma should be complex, honey and orchid. Very distinctive. Thanks, Joy, Leo messaged back. Leaving Professor Reed's, he had acquired a very expensive cake of tea, a notice of her satisfaction from the system, and a growth reward of 0.1 cm. Leo Foster, now standing at 5 feet 9 inches, really felt like he was getting taller. He discussed his height with his godfather before. Dr. Shun was on the shorter side, a consequence of childhood malnutrition that couldn't be reversed. He had explained that in traditional medicine, a woman's growth period ends around 21, while a man's can continue until 24. Sensing Leo's insecurity, he'd reassured him, "You're already quite tall, and with your healthy lifestyle, proper exercise, diet, and a positive mindset, you can still shoot up a bit before you're 24. Given that theory, Leo thought, a sudden growth spurt at 21 was perfectly reasonable. He was heading to the library to study when a message popped up in the dorm group chat for Sean. It was a screenshot. The roommate chronicles 40. 18M likes, 253 following 5,001M followers Sean. To celebrate 5 million dinners on me tonight. How about somewhere nice? That private kitchen near the Honors College? For Sean, that place was the pinnacle of expensive. A glass of water cost $15. Sure, they opened the bottle in front of you and poured it over ice, but he'd rather drink from faucet. Jordan, let's go. Time to bleed the rich. Sean, you AI-powered monster, you're incredible. Alex, I'm in. Sean, you legend. Even the aliens from the three-body problem would want to apply for a green card to follow you. Leo 666. Let's go. Sean, it's all thanks to our star, Leo //omega/// Leo, you want to bring your girlfriend? Leo checked with Stella, who said she was free. Leo, okay, I'm bringing a +1. One of the foundations of a lasting relationship, he thought, was being able to get along with each other's friends. If you loved your partner but couldn't stand their friends, that was a major red flag. People are, after all, the company they keep. Stella might seem aloof, but she was easy to be around once you got to know her. She was knowledgeable and well-read, but never condescending. She had a very down-to-earth quality. She wasn't an extrovert, but she was reliable and genuine. Leo had asked her to schedule the visit with her parents, but she'd replied that her father had been called away to New York on business again. Leo let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding, a silent, groundhog-like scream echoing in his mind. The truth was, he wasn't ready. This wasn't something a higher intelligence stack could solve. He had matured a lot recently, but even a forced ripening takes time. His technical skills might be advanced, but his mind hadn't caught up. Yesterday, in the kitchen, he'd even asked Professor Hoffman what it was like the first time he went to Penelope's house, if he was nervous, what he should bring. The first time I went to Penelope's house, the professor had said her family thought I was the house cleaner they called. Before I could explain, they had me scrubbing floors all morning. Your godmother had to step out for an emergency. Leo winced. That's so dramatic and brutal. The professor had told him not to worry too much. What matters most is your girlfriend's attitude. As long as she's firm in her choice, you'll be fine. But Leo still wanted to make a good impression. If he had a daughter who looked like Stella and she brought home some punk with bleached hair, he'd probably cry. He was happy to postpone the inevitable. Still, he needed to prepare a gift. He wouldn't give Victoria Vance the skincare set. Stella had mentioned her mother was loyal to a specific brand. He considered painting her a portrait, but that felt wrong since she'd just spent a fortune buying one of his. The tea, however, was a perfect idea. Stella had said her mother loved tea. Her father's name, Richard Vance, felt vaguely familiar. He thought he'd read an article in a business magazine about a tycoon with that name. But the man in the article was a ruthless predator, a history of hostile takeovers, union busting, environmental violations, and shady connections. The story read like a gangster's rise to power, laundered into a tale of entrepreneurial success. It's just sensationalist journalism, Leo told himself. Thinking of Stella's elegance and Victoria Vance's grace, he imagined her father must be a refined, gentle man. That evening, Sean headed out early. If you were hosting, you should be the first to arrive. It felt like preparing for a family event back home, where the host had to set up the tables and chairs and be ready to welcome guests. He needed to stop by the bookstore first. His life now revolved around editing, filming with Leo, and lurking in online forums for photographers and videographers. A professional in one of his groups had recommended a book, calling it a must-read for every photographer. Sean had looked it up online and winced at the price, over $180. He wanted to check it out in person first. Browsing in a bookstore wasn't stealing, after all. He was wearing a new outfit, a windbreaker, track pants, and sneakers, all from their trip to the outlets in the capital. It wasn't that he was trying to dress up. He just didn't have many clothes, and these were next in the rotation. But maybe it was the new clothes, or his good mood, or the sense of accomplishment from his recent work. But he carried himself with a new confidence. He seemed taller, more handsome. Before, he'd often come across as introverted, easily pushed around, even a little gloomy. Now, there was a strength in his posture, a firmness in his gaze. It didn't matter what a guy's face looked like. If he was tall and stood up straight with confidence, he was attractive. But if that same tall guy had greasy hair, dandruff on his shoulders, and couldn't make eye contact, he could have the face of a model and still not look good. Sean had even washed his hair, knowing there would be pictures. On his way out, he video called his mom. Her face was still a bit swollen, but her spirits were good. Seeing her son on the screen, looking so vibrant and full of life, a smile spread across her face. Seeing her child thriving so far away down south made her feel better, though her eyes welled up with tears. They exchanged a few pleasantries. She told him not to worry, that she, his dad, and his sister were all fine, and reminded him to eat well and stay warm. After hanging up, Sean rubbed his face and took a long, deep breath before striding forward. The student strip was bustling with activity. He reached the bookstore and started searching for the book himself, but couldn't find it. He spotted the girl in the green apron, Hannah Chun. She was efficiently making a coffee for a customer while simultaneously straightening a stack of books. When another customer asked a question, she answered quickly and pleasantly, her movements neat and organized. He hesitated to ask, feeling that if he asked for help and then didn't buy the book, it would be awkward, but he was out of options. He assumed she wouldn't remember him. They had only been in the same work-study group once, and there had been other people. They hadn't even really talked. He only remembered her because of how incredibly competent she was, like one of those ants from his village who could run a whole wedding reception single-handedly. But back then, he hadn't found her attractive. He, like most guys, was shallow. She didn't wear makeup and dressed very plainly. But today, under the warm lights of the bookstore, she was wearing a simple white t-shirt and gray sweatpants under her navy apron, and she looked nice. Her hair, which had been short before, was longer now, pulled up in a large bun. Her face was round, but she didn't look bulky. Sean approached her hesitantly. "Excuse me, do you have this book?" Hannah glanced at the title on his phone and nodded. "We do. I'll show you." She led him to a shelf in the back and pointed to the top row. "This one, right?" He reached up and took it down. It was the one. He thanked her profusely. "You're welcome, Sean Riley," she said with a smile. He was stunned that she remembered his full name. He flipped through the book. It was packed with useful information, the kind that was hard to find online. He decided to buy it. At the checkout, Hannah told him to follow the bookstore's social media for a $20 coupon and walked him through the process. After paying, he gathered his courage. "I remember you too, Hannah Chun." She smiled again, and 2 dimples appeared on her round cheeks, perfectly symmetrical. For some reason, Sean's heart started hammering. He grabbed his book and practically fled the store, running as if a dog were chasing him. He ran all the way to the lake, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He decided to walk the long way to the honors college instead of taking the campus shuttle, partly to save the dollar, but mostly to clear his head. He'd always had a thing for girls who were a little chubby. He found them comforting, and he loved a girl with a bright smile. He was an introvert. An extroverted partner would balance him out. The setting sun painted the lake in hues of red and orange, matching the flush on his face and the warmth in his chest. By the time he reached the restaurant, he was slightly out of breath. He had called ahead to reserve a private room, but he didn't know which one they'd given him. He wanted to check to make sure it was a nice spot, especially since Leo was bringing his girlfriend. This was the first time Sean had ever planned to spend a significant amount of money to treat his friends. His budget was $1,000, a staggering sum for him, more than he usually spent on food in a month. But it was worth it. This was a celebration of his hard work, a milestone worth sharing. When he entered the restaurant, a waitress looked him over. Seeing his slightly disheveled state, she seemed to assume he was a repairman. Sean was a bit older than the average student, and all the time spent filming outside had tanned his skin. Walking into the upscale restaurant, he felt a flicker of his old insecurity. "I have a reservation for dinner," he told the waitress. "I just wanted to check on the table." He gave her his phone number. She consulted a notebook and confirmed his booking. "You're only 5 people, so I've put you at the semi-enclosed table in the blue mist section." Sean frowned. That wasn't what they had discussed on the phone. He followed her to a corner of the main courtyard, sectioned off by a folding screen. "I reserve a private room," he said. "I'm sorry, sir," the waitress said, looking down at her notebook. The private rooms have a $1,500 minimum. Sean's face flushed. It wasn't that he couldn't afford it, but he was angry. They hadn't said that on the phone. And the last time they'd come here, there was no mention of a minimum charge. A profound sense of frustration washed over him. It was the feeling of spending your hard-earned money and still not being treated with basic respect. He had so little experience with these kinds of situations, he didn't know how to respond. He just wanted to arrange a nice dinner for his friends, and somehow it had turned into this humiliating ordeal. He wanted to turn and walk out. He looked up at the ceiling lights, thinking how easily Alex would have handled this. He couldn't even book a table without messing it up. The restaurant hadn't officially opened for dinner service yet. In the corner, a large, leafy monstera plant stood silently, its form perfectly illuminated by a spotlight. In the center of the courtyard, a large pot held a single, crooked tree, its green leaves forming a beautiful natural canopy. The restaurant's decor was beautiful, a place Sean could appreciate and even dream of emulating if he ever had an old house of his own. But he never imagined that this place, a place he admired and was willing to spend a significant amount of his own money on, would treat him with such disdain. He gave them his patronage, and they gave him a stone. In this world, it often felt like the poor looked down on other poor people the most. The waitress, seeing his simple clothes and unassuming demeanor, had dismissed him as someone without money and casually given his reserved room away. If some con artist had walked in, all bluster and no cash, she would have treated him with fawning respect. Sean felt a surge of anger, but he didn't argue. He knew the others wouldn't have been treated this way. Jordan looked rich. Alex had an air of authority, the kind of guy who looked like he might be there to conduct a fire inspection. Leo had the clean-cut look of a rich family son. They always picked on a quiet one. Honest people, tongue-tied and easily flustered, were destined to be taken advantage of. If you're willing to take a loss, there will always be more losses to take. Sean wasn't willing, but he didn't want to resort to impotent rage. Screaming at a waitress would put him on her level. He'd seen TikToks about dealing with situations like this. A creator would act all socially anxious while calmly dialing the Better Business Bureau or pull out a prop chainsaw and ask if they could make a reservation. The videos were satisfying, but he couldn't replicate them. Where was he going to find a chainsaw right now? He took a deep breath. He couldn't let this get to him. This was a learning experience. The problem was with them, not with him. His hard work, his sleepless nights editing, he had earned the right to be here. He asked himself what Leo would do. He wouldn't get into a pointless argument. The goal was to solve the problem, to have a nice dinner with friends, not to reform the service industry. When in doubt, Sean decided to call Alex. He knew Leo would do the same. Alex had just gotten back to the dorm. He picked up Sean's call. "What's up? We're about to head over." Sean tried to keep his voice steady. "I booked a private room, but when I got here, the waitress said it's not available. She said we can have a corner table, but a private room has a minimum charge now. Should we go somewhere else?" The waitress, holding her notebook, was idly tapping her new Gucci sneakers on the floor, not even looking at him. "I can tell if you have money at a glance," she thought. "Even if your clothes are new, they're all last season's sale rack junk. Trying to act like a big shot here." Alex could hear the frustration in Sean's voice. "No, don't change it. A corner table is fine. We're just grabbing a casual dinner. We're on our way." But inside, Alex was furious. He knew Sean had put a lot of thought into this dinner, that it was a big deal for him. He understood the subtle cruelty of the situation, the kind of slight that was designed to make you feel small and powerless. Complaining was often useless. Some small business owners would just join their staff in yelling at you. Alex hung up and explained the situation to Leo and Jordan. "That waitress is out of line," Jordan said. "Sean's too nice." Leo felt a surge of anger too. He knew how excited Sean had been. It was just disgusting. Alex could solve this instantly. He knew the owner, Carter Hayes, a rich kid who also went to Northwood. To run a business on campus, you had to deal with student government, and Alex knew everyone. He could make one call, but he also knew that swooping in to save the day would feel like showing off, like undermining Sean. So he chose a different path. As Jordan started the car, Alex pulled out his phone. He wasn't going to call the owner. He was going to call the university's health and safety office, the fire marshal's office, and the food services compliance department. Sean could take it, but Alex couldn't. They were his roommates, his brothers. If he didn't have their back, who would? "Hey," he said into the phone, his voice smooth and authoritative. "Yeah, I need you to do me a favor. We're going to need a full inspection team over at the private kitchen by the Honors College. Let's call it a surprise drill for the upcoming food festival. Yeah, the more people, the better. I owe you one." Meanwhile, Leo, on his way to pick up Stella, felt a similar surge of protective anger. When Stella saw his uncharacteristically dark mood, she asked him what was wrong. He told her the story, his words tumbling out in a rush of indignation. He's so frugal, you know? The money he was going to spend tonight is more than he spends on food in a month. He was so serious about this, and for them to treat him like that, it's just sick. I know if it happened to me, I'd be crushed. He works so hard, Stella. I get to go on dates with you, and he's in the room from the moment he wakes up to the moment he goes to sleep, just editing. Stella listened to her boyfriend's passionate tirade and found it incredibly endearing. He was so soft-hearted. She leaned over and kissed him. Then she took out her phone, opened her messaging app, and found her father's contact. The matter, she decided, was quite simple. A handsome young man in a tailored suit played the piano in the lobby, his back to a shimmering water wall. The gentle sound of the cascading water and the clear notes of the piano created a soothing, elegant atmosphere. Carter Hayes, the restaurant owner, had been at an afternoon tea with his friend Kyle Jennings. Of course, they weren't there for the tea. Guys didn't go for afternoon tea unless there was business to discuss. The place was exclusive and expensive, a step above Carter's own establishment. After a while, they were joined by a third man, Levi, who was harder to get a meeting with. Both Carter and Kyle treated him with a clear deference. Levi got straight to the point. He had a friend from the capital who wanted to buy a horse ranch as a gift. He knew Carter had one and was there to broker a deal at market price. Levi was a major player among the local second-generation elite, with connections in D.C. So when he acted as a middleman, you listened. Carter nodded. His horse ranch was losing money, but the land itself was valuable. Still, with Levi brokering the deal for someone even more powerful, he knew he had no leverage. The market's not great right now, he began, but the land is in a prime location. It's got a lake, a sheer cliff face. It looks like something out of a Western. That's why I bought it in the first place. Levi said nothing, just quietly rotated the black obsidian bracelet on his wrist, the beads clicking softly. Carter's words trailed off. I remember that piece of land, Levi said quietly. Weren't there some irregularities with the permits back when you acquired it? Carter froze. Kyle sighed internally. You idiot, Carter. He said market price. Why are you trying to haggle? Now you're going to lose everything. Kyle knew that if he had a horse ranch, he'd be begging Levi to take it off his hands. The connections were worth more than any property. No wonder Carter's father's business was successful, but Carter himself was still seen as a lightweight. He lacked vision. Just then, Carter's phone rang. The caller ID was Little Lemon. He declined the call. A moment later, it rang again. You'd better answer that before the young lady gets angry, Kyle teased. It's probably just something at the restaurant, Carter said, embarrassed. The third time it rang, he put it on speaker. A panicked female voice filled the air. Boss, it's bad. There are a bunch of inspectors here. They're checking fire safety, health codes, everything. Carter's head snapped up to look at Levi, who shot him a dark look. Don't look at me. I wouldn't go to this much trouble over something so petty. Kyle knew it wasn't Levi. The restaurant was on campus property. It had to be a university issue. The city inspectors would be at home by now. Did you piss someone off at the university? Kyle asked. We should go back with you. Carter shook his head, confused. Impossible. Who would I offend? Everyone who comes to my restaurant is a guest. But he knew Kyle was right. This had nothing to do with Levi. The three of them headed back to campus. Sean sat down at the corner table the waitress had assigned him. He felt a sense of calm now. Alex was on his way. He would handle it. Sean looked at the menu but didn't order, waiting for the others. Soon, Alex and Jordan arrived, followed by Leo and Stella. The dinner rush was starting, and the restaurant was filling up. The waitress who had denied Sean the private room saw his friends arrive and felt a flicker of unease. There had been other rooms available. She just assumed he was broke and didn't want him taking up valuable space. But his friends, they all looked wealthy and polished. Still, they were just students. What could they do? Sean had already composed himself. He was still angry, but he had decided to use this as a learning experience. The waitress's prejudice was her problem. His own lack of confidence was his. He handed the menu to Alex, who took charge without hesitation. He asked Stella if she had any dietary restrictions, then expertly curated a meal. When you're ordering for a group, he explained to Sean and Leo, the rule of thumb is N+2, the number of people plus 2 dishes. That should include appetizers, main courses, a soup, and a starch. Sean and Leo nodded, taking mental notes. Alex ordered 2 cold appetizers, 3 main courses, a mix of hearty and refined dishes, a vegetable side, a soup, and rice. He avoided any exotic or unnecessarily expensive items. You don't order the king crab at a place like this, he said. It's overpriced and probably not fresh. When the waitress asked about drinks, Alex declined, asking only for water. The group chatted warmly, ignoring the less-than-ideal seating. Stella had messaged her father on the way over. The food on campus is terrible. I want to eat better. Richard Vance's mind spun. This was new. He'd offered to send a private chef before. Do you want me to arrange a restaurant for you? Which one do you like? Stella replied, I can't cook, but he can. He gave me that antique you liked. You said I shouldn't accept expensive gifts from people. So I want to give him a restaurant. Then he'll have to cook for me every day. Is that okay? Richard Vance. Okay. Now, at the table, Stella was fully engaged in the conversation, her phone put away. She envied the easy camaraderie between Leo and his roommates. They were like brothers, their different personalities complementing each other perfectly. Just as the appetizers arrived, so did the inspectors. Wave after wave of them. First, fire safety, then health and sanitation, then food services. The restaurant was on the student strip and fell under university jurisdiction. A crowd of curious students gathered, peering in, many of them waving and calling out greetings to the group in the corner. The waitress who had caused the problem knew exactly what was happening. She nervously called her boss. Carter Hayes arrived in his G-Wagon less than 20 minutes later. The shrimp dish had just been served at their table. He saw the inspectors, the empty dining room, and then the single-occupied table, crammed into a corner. And he saw who was sitting there. Stella Vance, Alex Young, Leo Foster. He knew Stella's family was on another level. He knew Alex's father was the deputy mayor. And Leo. He knew Leo had just donated $10 million to the university and had 5 million followers on TikTok. And the fat guy, Jordan, his family's company, was one of the biggest taxpayers in the city. These were the people his waitress had stuffed into a corner. Carter felt his vision swim. He jogged over to their table, ignoring Kyle and Levi behind him. Levi followed, and his eyes landed on the table. He didn't know most of them, but he recognized Stella and the young man next to her. Wasn't that the person Dylan Sloan from the Capitol had asked him to buy a horse ranch for? Brothers. Sister. You're here. Carter gushed, his voice thick with panic. Why didn't you tell me you were coming? I would have reserved the best room for you. Had the chef prepare something special. The waitress standing next to him nervously wrung the hem of her apron. Alex smiled, a tight, humorless expression. We couldn't possibly impose. My roommate Sean here was hosting. He booked a private room in advance, but unfortunately, your waitress told him they were all full, and that if we really wanted one, there was a minimum charge. We're all just students, you see. We can't afford that. But it's no trouble. We're fine in the main dining room. We even get to see so many of our friends. He gestured to the crowd of inspectors, who all waved back at him. Carter felt like he was going to cry. You're all just students? You can't afford it. He turned and looked at the girl beside him, the one whose arrogant, feisty attitude he'd found so attractive. Now, looking at her felt like finding half a cockroach in his mouth, its antennae still twitching. Sean hadn't been able to book a private room, and so the entire restaurant became one. A good man has 3 helpers, went the old saying. Sean might have been the soft tofu in this situation, but his friends had surrounded him with a wall of iron. This was the first time Carter Hayes had faced this many inspections since opening his restaurant. He'd had his family pull some strings to get the initial permits, but the ongoing campus-related compliance was his responsibility. Normally, as long as he didn't cause any major problems, the university administration couldn't be bothered. They had more than enough on their plates. But Alex Young, in his capacity as student body president, had explained that the university was planning a large-scale food festival. He'd requested that the relevant student-led committees from campus services do a preliminary drill here. And so they came. They weren't worried about offending anyone. After all, their president was standing right there, chatting and laughing with the owner like they were old friends. They figured Alex had specifically chosen this place as a practice ground for them. The students took their job seriously. With the president watching, they were eager to impress, meticulously checking every corner and asking detailed questions. And they genuinely found some problems. Though they were students, they'd all received proper training. By the time Carter arrived, they had already completed a thorough sweep. Even though we're students, Alex had told them, we have to be even more professional. Everything needs to be documented on paper so it can stand up to scrutiny. That's how we earn the trust of the faculty and our fellow students. So they were meticulous. The food safety hazards team finished first and presented their summarized findings. 1. This is a historic building with poor ventilation and high humidity. The storage area for flour and pasta is at high risk for mold. The dry goods are also susceptible to moisture, which can lead to fungal growth and a warning for potential mycotoxin contamination. There's a lack of standardized shelving in the walk-in. Raw and cooked foods are mixed. In one refrigerator, we found cured meat stored directly next to fresh vegetables. They held up a phone with a picture as evidence. The backyard well water is being used in the kitchen without regular testing for heavy metals or microbial contamination. One of the prep cooks has an expired food handler's permit. Not to be outdone, the fire safety inspection team presented their own report, primarily for Alex's benefit. 1. There's a narrow hallway less than 4 feet wide that obstructs an emergency exit route. The enclosed patio, which was converted into a private room, creates a confusing and convoluted evacuation path. The open flame cooking station is located directly under exposed wooden beams, decorative carvings, and near flammable materials like the kitchen doorway's curtain. A single stray spark could be catastrophic. When questioned, employees were unable to locate the manual fire alarm pull station and admitted they'd never received fire extinguisher training. The student who'd questioned the staff remembered the curt, defensive waitress, Skylar, snapping, "I don't know, Adam," when he'd asked, as if he were the one causing trouble. Finally, the health and sanitation team stepped up with their report. 1. The linen closet is also being used for dry food storage, creating a high risk of cross-contamination between dirty towels and ingredients. The student who wrote this was inwardly thrilled, remembering a TikTok compilation of restaurant health code nightmares that had highlighted this exact violation. The decorative carved window lattices and antique display shelves have significant dust and grime buildup in hard-to-clean corners. Gaps in the old woodwork are a potential haven for pests like cockroaches, posing a contamination risk to the food prep areas. The dishwashing area has poor drainage, resulting in standing water on the floor. It's a slip hazard and a breeding ground for bacteria like E. coli. One of the employees even complained about it himself. Of course, the students only identified the problems. They didn't offer solutions. They weren't true professionals, after all. Just being able to spot these issues and use the correct terminology was an accomplishment, and they found the whole exercise fascinating. Most of these students had never been to Carter's restaurant. The price of a single glass of water was enough to deter them. But they behaved with decorum, waiting quietly without wandering around. Still, their presence was a major disruption. The restaurant's main draws were its privacy and ambience, making it a popular spot for couples. With this crowd, any potential customers who arrived would take one look and turn right back around. Alex turned to Carter Hayes with an air of polite detachment. "We'll go ahead and eat now, so we don't disturb your inspection. I'm just a guest today, anyway. The real host is my roommate, Sean. We're celebrating his TikTok channel hitting 5 million followers. By the way, would you like him to do a promotional post for your restaurant?" Carter felt a wave of nausea. The only thing worse than swallowing half a fly was having to swallow the other half. To be honest, he hadn't even given the dark-skinned student a second glance when he walked in. He was the only unfamiliar face at the table, and Carter had instinctively overlooked him. Even when Alex said his roommate was paying, Carter hadn't registered it. His mind solely focused on placating the rest of the group. Well, damn, this guy was the real nuke. A TikTok channel with 5 million followers. How hard would it be for him to shut this place down? Not hard at all. Carter's own restaurant had a TikTok account that he'd worked hard on, and it only had 4,000 followers, some of them probably bots. Influencers with a few 100,000 followers could ruin a business. And this unassuming, quiet kid had over 5 million? The pieces clicked into place. Leo's account must be run by him. Of course, someone as busy as Leo Foster wouldn't be managing his own TikTok. He'd have a team. And this guy was that team. Carter wanted to slap himself. He glanced at the waitress, Skylar, who was still standing there, head down, staring at her shoes, not even offering an apology. How had he ever found her pouty, defiant attitude cute? Had he been watching too many cliché Netflix dramas? His other employees were polite. She was the only rude one, and instead of reprimanding her, he thought she was special. No wonder Kyle Jennings had looked at him like he was an idiot when he'd mentioned the cute new girl at his restaurant. Right now, Carter felt like a complete idiot, but he couldn't just throw her under the bus. He stepped forward and bowed his head in a sincere apology. "I'm so sorry. My employee was not properly trained, and she caused you this unpleasant experience. This meal is on me. Please, allow me to express my sincerest apologies." Alex didn't say a word. He just looked at Sean. Sean's hand, holding his chopsticks, was trembling slightly. From a moment the waitress had arrogantly told him there were no rooms, that he needed to meet a minimum charge, the feeling wasn't unfamiliar. Being looked down on for being poor was a common experience. But this time it stung more, maybe because he thought he'd finally arrived. He was here, ready and willing to spend a lot of money, $1,000, to treat his roommates to a great meal. To a rich person, that was nothing, but to him, it was a month's worth of food, several of his mother's dialysis treatments, half a month of his father gathering scrap metal in the bitter cold. Yet even when you came with money in hand, they could still look down on you. Because he truly hated spending that much money, had never spent that much on a single meal, he had treated the occasion with a deep, earnest gravity. As things escalated, Sean's hand trembled. He was emotional, but because he was emotional, he knew he couldn't afford to show it. When he got agitated, his speech sped up, and he'd lose his train of thought, coming off as purely emotional, turning a valid complaint into a mere tantrum. He envied people who could face injustice and calmly, clearly state their case. He set down his chopsticks, forcing himself to speak slowly, his gaze firm as he shook his head. I don't want a free meal. I don't know you. I'm just a customer here to eat. Tonight, I'm treating my roommates, but I need an apology from your waitress. When you do something wrong, you admit it. I booked a private room in advance. It's in your reservation book. When I showed up in person, she told me there were none available. But there are clearly empty rooms tonight. I don't know why she did that, and I don't know why I have to be questioned just for wanting to spend my money here. Jordan chimed in from the side. Your restaurant is really something else. Forcing a minimum spend is a pretty clear violation of fair trade practices. You guys are bold, openly breaking the law like that. Carter's blood boiled. The fat guy's sarcastic jabs were infuriating. But he knew the source of all this was the quiet, dark-skinned kid. Carter was used to looking down on people. He was wealthy, privileged, and he knew that 80% of the students at Northwood State would graduate and become wage slaves, never even sniffing a job at one of his family's companies. There were gaps between people, clear and distinct from the very beginning. He often overheard students in his restaurant, naively dreaming of making six figures right out of college. Impossible. The real world would teach them a harsh lesson. And this quiet kid was exactly the type Carter looked down on. No powerful background, no inheritance, no exceptional intelligence or emotional quotient. On what grounds could he possibly succeed? And yet here he was. He might not have the background or the inheritance, but he had a squad of powerful friends and a TikTok account with 5 million followers. Apologize, Carter said, his voice low and dangerous, staring at the waitress beside him. The owner was here, bowing and scraping, and she was still standing there with her chin up, completely clueless. Thankfully, there was no dramatic movie moment where she refused and ran off, prompting a chase. I'm sorry. I made a mistake, she mumbled, her eyes welling up with tears. She felt wronged, humiliated in front of so many people. What hurt most was that her boss was making her apologize. Even as she said the words, her eyes were still defiant, and she looked tragically beautiful as she cried. Sean saw her expression and felt a new wave of frustration. If he pressed the issue, he'd look like the bad guy. It reminded him of that day at the bookstore, seeing Hannah-chun trying to reason with the girl who only cried and did nothing while Hannah did all the work. Sean shook his head. You apologized, but I don't forgive you. Your apology isn't worth that much. If you can mess up a written reservation, it just means you're incompetent at your job. And sir, he said, looking at Carter, please have another server help us. With her here, we can enjoy our meal. Under Alex's supervision, the student inspection teams departed in an orderly fashion. They left with their heads held high, feeling like they'd done something meaningful, something official and proper. At first, Carter had been furious with Alex. I thought we were friends, and you're treating me like a circus monkey, sending this whole crew to my restaurant and ruining my business. But now, seeing his employee's pathetic excuse for an apology, his anger flared anew. We're all old foxes here, so let's drop the innocent act. He used to find her defiant attitude and the way her eyes would redden when she was angry to be cute. But in a professional setting, it was just embarrassing. Crying doesn't solve every problem. You can't cry your way through an exam or a job interview. Well, maybe the latter if you found a boss with a peculiar taste. And that look on her face, was that an apology? It was pure resentment and grievance. No wonder the other party was angry. If he were in their shoes, he'd be furious. Who the hell do you think you are? I'm paying good money to be insulted? But she was his employee. He couldn't exactly lecture her right here in front of everyone. It would look like he was putting on a show for them, like those parents who scold their child but are really yelling at someone else. All he could do was apologize again. He pulled her away and had the kitchen prepare several new dishes, telling the chef to bring out his best work. Kyle Jennings and the other guy, Levi, were still watching the show and hadn't left. As Carter rushed to make amends, he returned to find that Levi, who had barely spoken to him before, was now sitting right next to the dark-skinned student, calling him Sean like an old friend. I'm a huge fan of the Roommate Chronicles, Levi said smoothly. One of the first followers. The videos you shot on horseback are incredible. I've ridden before, so I know that to get those steady shots of another rider, you either have to be rock steady on your own horse or be filming from a car moving in sync. But there's no engine noise in your videos, so you must have been riding alongside him. That's seriously impressive. He knew exactly what to say, his praise landing right in Sean's sweet spot. Back in his small town, Sean had been the wildest kid on a horse or a motorcycle. He might not have looked handsome doing it, but his butt was glued to the saddle. He'd gotten plenty of praise in the comments, but this was the first time a fan had complimented him in person. When I first followed you, you only had 1,000 fans. Now it's over 5 million. It's definitely worth celebrating. Sean, as a fan, I'm going to shamelessly crash your party tonight. Sean was the type of person who, if you offended him, would stew in silent anger. But if you were polite and friendly, with a sincere smile, he genuinely didn't know how to refuse. He was always worried about making others feel awkward. Levi wasn't entirely lying. He had seen the account, but he wasn't exactly a die-hard fan. But he was well-mannered, from a good family, and he knew how to read a room. In this situation, trying to cozy up to Leo or Stella would be awkward. Tonight, it was clear they were all rallying around Sean. Even if Sean was a nobody, the fact that these people were protecting him made him someone worth knowing. Besides, it was easy to spot a genuinely honest person, which is why Carter's clueless waitress had been so quick to dismiss him. Levi knew that with people like Sean, sincerity was everything. They might be socially inexperienced and thin-skinned, but they weren't stupid. Sincerity was the ultimate weapon, followed closely by shamelessness. So he actually pulled up a chair and joined them. Kyle Jennings was even thicker-skinned. If a smooth operator like Levi was willing to humble himself, Kyle had no shame at all. Me too, he thought, and sidled right up to the table. This was the downside of not getting a private room. You never knew who might show up. The two of them shamelessly joined the table, claiming to be fans celebrating the 5 million follower milestone. It was a fitting addition to the scene. Their praise also served as a vote of confidence for Sean, a way of taking his side. No one else could object. The newcomers were being perfectly charming. And at that moment, Sean needed it. Sometimes, a person needs a little praise, especially from strangers. It builds confidence. Compliments from his roommates were different. He could never be sure if it was because they were friends or because he was genuinely talented. He always assumed it was the former. Sean, a bit awkwardly, dealt with his two new fans, but his back was a little straighter. Stella watched the two men, the corner of her mouth twitching. She'd seen them at some event before, but didn't know them well. Alex looked at the one who called himself Levi and felt like he was looking in a mirror. Jordan looked at Kyle, vaguely recognizing him as that Kyle guy. Kyle was a natural talker, firing off jokes one after another. Carter had the chef send out a parade of dishes and even brought out a bottle of his best-aged liquor, as if nothing had happened. The meal continued, full of chatter and laughter. Levi sat down and had a genuine conversation with Sean about photography and filming. Though his real goal was Leo, he was in no hurry. First, you make a friend. A friend of a friend is also a friend. And in this group, Sean was the easiest to befriend. Honest people have the softest hearts. Levi was also annoyed with Carter. What kind of person hires such an employee? Preying on the quiet ones. If you push an honest person too far, when they finally snap, they have no retreat. It's either you or them. Though two people had been added to the table in the corner, it wasn't awkward. Jordan was a talker, too. He turned to Leo. Did you ever ask your godfather about that thing I asked you to ask him? Leo froze. A few days ago, Jordan had randomly sent him a private message. Check out my leg. It was a picture of a thick, pale thigh. Leo had thought his account got hacked. But then Jordan asked him to find out if the indentation his sock left on his ankle was a problem. Leo nodded. He had asked, and Dr. Shin had answered quickly. Leo had been peppering him with questions lately, trying to memorize as much as possible while his memory buff was active. So what did Dr. Shin say? Are these sock marks I get every night a sign of edema in my calves? Or what? My godfather said to check for marks when you first put your socks on in the morning. If there are none, check again in the afternoon. If there are marks in the afternoon, it means you have poor circulation. You need to improve it. What if I have marks in the morning too? Jordan asked. If you have marks the second you put your socks on in the morning, Leo said with a perfectly straight face, it means your socks are too tight. You need to buy a bigger size. Jordan was speechless. The rest of the table burst out laughing. A genius doctor, truly, Jordan said, raising his glass. I'll buy new socks tomorrow. A toast to the good doctor. Everyone raised their glasses. The 20-year-old liquor was rich, fragrant, a little thick, and powerfully intoxicating. It was supposed to be a happy occasion. Despite the small hiccup, it ended well. That's just life. You go through things, big and small, and that's what they call growth. Growth isn't always about grand, dramatic events. More often, it's about navigating the trivial, annoying little bumps in the road. Get over them, and you grow. Stumble, and you fall. And if you fall, It's not the end of the world. You just get up and keep walking. The latter half of the meal was genuinely enjoyable. With 2 extra guests, it was only natural to add a few more dishes. And with Alex and Jordan at the table, there was never a dull moment. Alex had made his point by calling in the inspection teams to get justice for Sean, but he didn't dwell on it. The main purpose of the evening was to celebrate, not to let one incident ruin everything. So for the rest of the night, the young men chatted happily about the future and their plans. The presence of 2 outsiders, Levi and Kyle, was a little awkward at first, but both were incredibly perceptive. Sean, having been around more people lately, could tell that this Levi who claimed to be his fan was no ordinary person. His clothes were even flashier than Alex's, and Kyle next to him was like a skinny version of Jordan in both dress and demeanor. Sean was honest, not stupid. He understood they were making a friendly gesture, and he accepted it. He didn't have anything they could possibly want from him, and if they were after his roommates, he trusted that Alex and Jordan could handle themselves. As for Leo, he was younger, but he had a strong support system, and his girlfriend, Stella, looked fierce. She seemed way tougher than Leo and would never let anyone take advantage of him. Levi was truly sincere. After saying he was a fan, he mentioned that his work involved municipal publicity. He believed Sean's TikTok channel not only promoted the university, but the entire city of Bridgeport, and that he could apply for funding from the city's publicity budget. It was just like the university giving them a grant, he explained. Alex was impressed. This guy's got moves. He raised his glass enthusiastically. Levi, my man, I feel a connection. It's like we're kindred spirits. The atmosphere was good, everyone's mood restored. Elsewhere, the waitress, Skylar, was not having a good time. After being sent away, Carter was too busy placating his guests to deal with her immediately. Skylar, having been publicly reprimanded and forced to apologize, felt deeply wronged. With no one paying her any attention, she slipped out of the restaurant and walked around the old building to get some air. Her eyes were still red. Feeling the injustice, she called her best friend to complain. I just told him there was a minimum for the private rooms, and he couldn't afford it. So he didn't book. Then he comes back to eat and just look for trouble. His roommate called in a bunch of people to inspect fire safety, sanitation, everything. Yeah, from the university, so it's probably not a big deal. But it got me yelled at by my boss. Her friend asked curiously, "Your boss, is that the rich guy you said was hitting on you?" "Yeah." "Oh, don't worry about it. It's just some random customer. Apologize to your boss later. It was just some broke loser trying to act tough. It's not your fault." Skylar, comforted by her friend, started to feel better. "Yeah, you're right. Just some jerk." After her friend cheered her up, she slipped back into the restaurant when no one was looking. Carter was still busy trying to make things right with his guests. The university inspection had happened, and he had to respond. While they couldn't shut him down like a government agency, he still had to play by the school's rules, and the issues they raised were real. But fixing those was secondary. The priority was satisfying tonight's guests. Seeing that they had accepted his offerings of extra food and expensive liquor, he finally breathed a sigh of relief. He didn't dare go back to their table. Only then did he call Skylar into his office, a small tea room he'd set up for himself. Skylar had been there before. She had been furious, but her friend's advice echoed in her head. Girls should act weak, aggrieved, sad. Don't get angry in front of him. Your looks are your advantage. Anger will just make him impatient. Carter had been ready to tear her a new one. Who the hell do you think you are? I don't even dare to be picky with my customers. And you, a waitress, have the audacity to judge them? I'm working my ass off like a servant, bowing and scraping, and you're standing there on your high horse? But when he called her in, he saw her standing there, her nose and eyes red from crying, looking fragile and slim. The uniform that looked bulky on the other waitresses seemed a little too big on her, making her appear delicate and frail. "I'm so sorry, boss. I caused you trouble. I was so stupid," she said, her voice soft and trembling. Carter's anger evaporated. She was standing so close, apologizing so meekly, her lips red from biting them. He softened. Seeing the look in his eyes, she thought, just like my friend said, act weak, humor him a little. It's not like I committed a major crime. Carter, as predicted, caved. "Just let it go this time, but be careful from now on." "Okay, boss. I'll get back to work then," Skylar said, taking the win. She knew not to linger. It was still work hours, after all. Skylar went downstairs to the restroom to touch up her makeup. While there, she called her friend again. "It's handled. See? It was no big deal. Just some broke student. The boss made me apologize in public, but then he comforted me just now. He's a rich kid, really connected." Leo and Sean, emerging from adjacent stalls, heard the entire conversation as they washed their hands at the sink. Just then, Skylar stepped out, her makeup perfectly reapplied. She saw them, but instead of acknowledging them, She tossed her head and walked away. Leo had come along because he was worried Sean had had too much to drink. He never expected to run into the waitress again. The world felt ridiculously small. Sean was calmer now, less angry. He realized it was pointless to argue with someone like that. He just had to do his own thing. It was a one-time meal. Even if the food was good, he would never come back. Leo, however, was annoyed. He was never one to go easy on a girl just because she was pretty. Wrong was wrong. Right was right. What did looks have to do with it? The way she had just strutted past them with her head held high was incredibly grating. Leo and Sean returned to the table. Stella, seizing the moment while her boyfriend was away, glanced at her phone and sent a text to her father. Dad, you're dragging your feet. His TikTok just hit 5 million followers today. I wanted to give him his gift today. Can you handle it or not? Richard Vance read the message and pressed a hand to his chest, feeling his heart palpitate. She's my daughter. She's my daughter. She's my only daughter, he chanted to himself. When Leo and Sean returned, they didn't say much. Levi was still deep in conversation with Sean, discussing the possibility of a city-wide promotional campaign. He wasn't just talking big. He was getting into the specifics, outlining the terms of a potential collaboration. This wasn't some drunken promise to build a rocket. It felt real. He seriously discussed the details, the publicity department's requirements, their annual budget for such projects, and who would review the results. Sean, ever the honest man, found himself earnestly discussing what kind of content they would need to shoot. Meanwhile, Richard Vance, spurred on by his daughter's text, felt a phantom toothache. His liver, spleen, stomach, and kidneys all seemed to ache in sympathy. He never imagined a day would come when he would have to personally procure a gift for his daughter to give to a boy she liked. Acquiring a restaurant wasn't something you could do in an instant. There were financial audits, negotiations, new licenses, tax paperwork, and all sorts of permits, not to mention dealing with the property lease or sale, employees, and finances. But his daughter wanted it, and he couldn't say no. In TV dramas, the powerful CEO sees something and says, I'll buy it. It's $1 million? I'll offer $100 million. In reality, the powerful CEO sees something and says, it's $1 million? I'll offer $500,000. You're asking way too much. Richard immediately had his assistant investigate the restaurant his daughter had specified, then looked for any business connections, cooperative or competitive, with the owner's family. The circle of the wealthy in any given city was small. Sure enough, there was an overlap. Richard contacted the person in charge of the other family's business, ostensibly to discuss a different deal, and then casually threw in the restaurant as an add-on. My daughter is studying here, and her appetite hasn't been great lately. I want to make sure she has somewhere to eat healthy, hot meals, Richard said, using a reason even he didn't believe. It was at least a better excuse than, my daughter wants to gift a restaurant to the pretty boy she likes. The sheer absurdity of it all made him feel like a fleet of coal trucks was rumbling through his mind. But his hands dutifully typed out a reply to his daughter. It's handled. I've already sent my assistant, Mr. Lou, over. He will assist you with everything. Upstairs in his office, Carter Hayes poured himself a cup of tea, thinking he had finally managed to smooth things over for the night. Then his father's call came. Are you on campus? Yeah, I'm at the restaurant, Carter said, his voice quiet. He was still a little afraid of his old man. You're a student. You should be focused on your studies. This restaurant, don't worry about it anymore. I have other plans for you. Carter shot up from his seat. What? Dad, what did I do? Some people came to inspect the place tonight, food safety, and all that. It's just a campus inspection. I can handle it. His father, old Mr. Hayes, hadn't known about that, but hearing his son's frantic voice annoyed him. How did I raise such a buffoon? He wondered. He decided to bluff. The mess you made, and you dare complain? Tell me exactly what you did today, he boomed. Carter, assuming his father already knew everything, couldn't help but vent. It was just one of my waitresses. Some guy had a reservation for a private room, and she didn't give it to him. So he called a bunch of people to inspect the restaurant. I already apologized and sent over a ton of food and drinks. What more do they want? Old Mr. Hayes hadn't expected his bluff to yield such a detailed confession. This damn kid was causing trouble even with his little restaurant. Didn't you tell me you were having dinner with that Kyle Jennings kid tonight? And that you'd invited someone from the Levi family? Carter was still annoyed that his own friends had abandoned him for the other table. We were supposed to, but then the trouble started. They came back with me, saw Stella Vance, and went to sit and eat with her group instead. Mr. Hayes listened, putting the pieces together. So, Richard Vance's daughter books a room at your place, and you make her sit in the main dining hall. Well done, son. Just brilliant. No wonder Richard had suddenly called him tonight to cooperate. It was all because his idiot son had screwed up. Richard Vance was not an easy man to deal with. To get out of this mess, he was going to have to pay a painful price, all for this stupid little restaurant. And his son, he really needed to be disciplined. If he could cause this much trouble now, who knew what disasters he'd create in the future? He could bankrupt the whole family. I want you home right now. That restaurant is no longer your concern. If you don't come back, I'm cutting off everything. Your allowance, your car, all of it. Carter was stunned. But what did I do? You used to complain that Levi was too arrogant to even look at you. Now, the person he won't look at is sitting at someone else's table, eating with them. And the people he's going out of his way to flatter, you managed to offend completely. So tell me, who's the arrogant one here? You or him? Old mister. Hayes hung up. Carter stared at his phone, his head spinning from his father's tirade. A knock came at his office door. My dad's assistant is here already. Mister. Well, what did my dad send you here for? Mister. Hayes asked me to watch over you, young master, and to make sure you don't do anything else stupid. Downstairs, Leo's group was finishing up their meal. It had been a long dinner, mainly because the two newcomers were incredibly talkative. In the end, Kyle Jennings paid the bill. Kyle, the quintessential playboy, was practically arm in arm with Jordan by the end of the night. He might seem clueless about small things, but he wasn't stupid about what mattered. If Levi was personally trying to win someone over, Kyle was smart enough to follow his lead. As they were leaving, they added each other on their phones, a whole circle of new contacts made for the sake of one person. Skylar hadn't waited on them again. With no other customers, she stood in a corner, playing on her phone. She didn't mind not working. She'd still get paid. She was texting her friend about how easy her job was. Just then, another person entered the restaurant. She went to greet him. It was a middle-aged man in a sharp suit. He didn't look like he was there to eat. Skylar informed him that the kitchen was closing soon. The man, Mr. Lou, said he was looking for someone. Carrying a briefcase, he walked inside and spotted Stella at the table in the main dining area. At the same time, Carter was being led downstairs by his father's assistant. Skylar wanted to greet her boss, but the man next to him looked stern, so she held her tongue. Not that anyone was paying attention to her. Miss Vance, Mr. Lou said, approaching the table. Here is the transfer agreement for the restaurant. We have a preliminary understanding. The property will be gifted to your friend, Mr. Foster. I will handle all the subsequent details. If your friend could please sign here. Stella took the agreement, glanced at it, and turned to Leo with a smile. Today is a celebration for you and Sean hitting 5 million followers, so I wanted to get you a gift. This place is adequate. It's yours. Your roommates have all tried your steamed fish, but I haven't. Can you make it for me sometime in the future? Leo was floored. Isn't this a little too much? But the agreement was already drawn up. He looked at Sean, then at the waitress, and finally at the restaurant's owner, Carter Hayes. He turned back to Stella and asked, It's really being transferred to me? In that case, does that mean I can fire people? In the real world of work, a boss will usually try to avoid firing you. They'll find ways to make you quit on your own. Firing someone means severance pay. If you leave, they owe you nothing. Of course, Leo was just joking, a response on Sean's behalf. He knew to leave professional matters to the professionals. Sometimes, when you help your brother's boat cross the river, your own boat reaches the shore. He signed the document and handed it to Mr. Lou. I don't really know anything about running a business, but I can cook a dish or two. I'll have to rely on you for the rest. Mr. Lou breathed a sigh of relief. The kid was reasonable. For a second there, hearing him talk, he'd worried he was dealing with a clueless amateur. When the boss is clueless, the staff works themselves to death. The assistant from the Hayes family, for example, was about to be very busy. After dinner, the group dispersed. Leo and his roommates headed back to the dorm. They had an early morning workout with Professor Reed. The key was to be ruthless in action, but gracious in demeanor. They didn't mock Carter Hayes or even look at the waitress again. They just said their polite goodbyes. Mr. Lou stayed behind, as did Mr. Wu, Carter's father's assistant. Carter's face cycled through shades of red and white. Skylar just stood there, looking aggrieved. Seriously? A bunch of grown men, who all look well off, are going to hold a grudge against me? And they're supposed to be college students. So uncultured. Carter watched them leave, then looked at Skylar, her eyes still red and brimming with self-pity. At that moment, he wanted to cry too. No wonder Kyle Jennings had clapped him on the shoulder before he left, a look of profound sympathy in his eyes. He really was an idiot. On the way back, a car came to pick up Kyle and Levi. Leo's group couldn't drive after drinking, so they decided to walk back to air out. The events of the evening had a lingering effect. On the road, Jordan looked at Stella and said sweetly, Stella, my queen, I'm on TikTok too. I have 2,000 followers now. Stella responded with a perfectly deadpan, and Jordan turned to Leo, feigning heartbreak. Leo, my brother, she was mean to me. Leo just stared at him. Dude, I'm straight. You're making me uncomfortable. They laughed and joked all the way back. Stella wasn't really that serious. She could take a joke. It was just that her default expression was stern, which made her seem intimidating. That was probably Richard Vance's fault. He had a very imposing face. Alex's legs were practically cramping with envy. God, I'd kill for a powerful father-in-law. I could skip 60 years of hard work. Sean was quiet, but you could tell he was happy. He knew that Leo accepting the restaurant so readily was partly because of him. He'd always thought of himself as the big brother of the dorm, but he was slowly realizing that everyone in the dorm looked out for him. When Leo's girlfriend bought things, she always got one for everyone, never treating anyone differently. At meals, if there was a dish he liked, they'd make sure it was in front of him more often. After dropping Stella off at her dorm, Leo returned to his own. The alcohol, which he hadn't felt much while drinking, was starting to hit him. After washing up, the lights went out, and he quickly fell asleep. The next morning, Leo opened his eyes to see Sean already awake, sitting at his computer. Leo got up, yawned, gave Sean a silent wave, and went to wash his face. A quick trip outside into the cold air woke him up completely. When he returned, Sean had already poured him a glass of honey water. He drank it, went to the bathroom, changed, and headed out. The order was important. Leo finished his routine and went downstairs to the track where he met Professor Reed. As expected, she was there, wearing a pair of hexagonal, gold-rimmed glasses. Leo hadn't noticed her little hobby. She must have a huge collection of unique eyeglasses. It was her own brand of stylish flair. Leo was slightly nearsighted, but didn't usually wear his glasses. He'd noticed, though, that his vision seemed to have improved with all the running. He supposed it was simple. Look at distant things, see more green, don't strain your eyes, and for God's sake, don't lie in the dark staring at your phone. Professor Reed was dressed warmly for the winter in a sweater, a windbreaker, and athletic pants. At her age, you couldn't risk catching a cold. Leo joined her for warm-ups, and they chatted for a bit. She was much more relaxed after her day off. The climate here was clearly better for her. She felt the strain on her heart lessen. In the capital, it had felt like she was carrying a heavy weight. Here, she'd slept through the night. As long as a person eats well and sleeps well, they'll be fine, barring accidents. The well-rested professor swung her arms, patting her shoulders. Southern winters were quite pleasant as long as you had heating indoors. Leo stretched his arms and legs to prevent cramps. Seeing him, Professor Reed felt like her life was back on track. She asked about his recent campus life. Nothing new, really. Just studying, business as usual. And, incidentally, opening a private restaurant. After warming up, Leo said goodbye to Professor Reed. It was nothing special, just their daily routine. But then, the mechanical voice sounded in his mind. Congratulations, host, on your successful progress with the gold-tier bachelorette, Evelyn Reed. Her favorability has reached 80. You may increase 1 attribute point. Please continue your efforts and strive for new heights. Amazing. He hadn't even done anything. It was true what they said. Companionship is the most heartfelt confession. All he did was warm up with her, and her favorability increased. Thinking about it, he could almost understand why that one rich old man in the TV show insisted on giving his nanny a house. Leo opened his attribute panel, which glowed with a golden edge, stamina, 8, 3, plus or minus 1, /10, endurance +1, speed +1, strength, agility +1, recovery, intellect, 8, 4, plus or minus 1, /10, perception, memory +1, logic +1, language +1, learning +1, creativity, vibe, 8, +1, /10, mood, passion, stress response, integrity, 8, -1, /10, consciousness, principles, conduct, appearance, 8, plus or minus 1, /10, features, style, physique, posture, lifespan, 21/70, 1/110, current/projected/max. His projected lifespan had unknowingly crept past 70. Maybe one day, he'd be one of those old guys at the park, handing out gold bracelets to the ladies in his dance group. Or, more likely, the elderly of his generation would be playing mobile games instead of dancing. Gifting skins to the grandmas? Thinking about his upcoming meeting with Stella's parents, he decided there wasn't enough time to improve his other attributes. Might as well put it into his face. If he looked good, he might win over his future mother-in-law. Leo chose to increase his appearance. Appearance, 8, 1, plus or minus 1, /10, features, style, physique, posture, +1, He had an expected appearance to increase by tenths of a point as well. When he thought about it, that actor Cade was truly blessed by the heavens. His natural features were a 9. As long as he didn't do something truly terrible, people would look at his face and assume he couldn't possibly be at fault. He wasn't sure how the attribute points were allocated within the subcategories, but he was pleased it had gone to posture. Correcting one's posture was difficult. You could get plastic surgery for your face, but there was no surgery for posture and physique. That came down to daily habits and character. With his new point allocated, Leo ran forward into the cool morning sun. The wind ruffled his hair. He was full of youthful energy under a clear, cloudless blue sky. It was a new day. Running makes you healthy. Young people possess health. In the eyes of the elderly, especially those who have been ill, a young person who loves to exercise is a beautiful thing. Professor Reed watched the young man run off as she continued her own exercises. Her movements resembled a popular TikTok routine called the Don't Be Angry workout. Don't be angry. Don't be angry. Anger will send you to an early grave. Don't be sad. Don't be sad. Sadness will make you go away. Don't you panic. Don't you panic. Panic will put you on a wall. Don't you worry. Don't you worry. Worry will get you a funeral. The movements were simple, large, and expansive, stretching the arms and patting the body from head to toe. It was an especially good routine for the morning, leaving one feeling open and refreshed. Leo hadn't recommended his godfather's wellness exercises to Professor Reed. She was already doing a fine job of living a long, healthy life. Her own methods were clearly working for her. Today was the day of General Ingram's follow-up examination. A weakness of traditional medicine was its reliance on diagnosis that couldn't be easily verified. It wasn't enough for the doctor or even the patient to say things were better. They needed the proof from modern medical equipment. General Ingram himself felt much better. He had been diligently practicing Dr. Shun's mindful restoration technique. For the past couple of days, besides his protein shakes, he'd been able to eat some solid foods, which had kick-started his digestive system. More importantly, he was sleeping an extra hour or 2 a night, getting a total of 4 or 5 hours. He wasn't sure if it was a placebo effect or something else, but he felt his condition had improved. The old general's life force was still incredibly strong. Previous checkups had shown that apart from the cancerous lesion, his other organs were quite healthy, even stronger than those of some sickly young people. This time, General Ingram's grandson, Liam, even came from school to accompany him to the hospital. He'd helped Dylan Sloan with his horse ranch trouble after meeting Leo there. Dylan, being a sharp guy, didn't offer Liam a gift. Instead, he offered a horse and the ranch to Leo. Liam was pleased with this arrangement. He couldn't accept anything from Dylan, but he also couldn't just wire Leo money for a consultation fee. Helping someone out and having them thank Leo instead was the perfect solution. Although the general felt better, everyone was waiting for the test results to be truly at ease. The family of a patient and the patient himself are always hoping for a miracle. When the results came back, they were astonishing. At this stage, they had expected the cancer to have spread rapidly, a declaration that the cancerous cells had defeated the healthy ones and were conquering the territory of his body. Instead, the test showed significant improvement. The lesion had clearly shrunk. It was unbelievable, but the scans didn't lie. Counting back, the only different treatments the general had received recently were 3 massage sessions and 7 days of practicing Dr. Shun's technique. The effect was staggering. For a terminally ill patient and their family, any glimmer of good news is a ray of hope. Even General Ingram himself posted a few messages in their small private chat group. The most immediate consequence was that Dr. Stephen Shun's reputation exploded once again. Coupled with his ownership of the priceless golden Buddha statue, it seemed he would be making frequent trips to the capital from now on, whether he wanted to or not. This time, he had truly made his mark among the nation's most powerful figures. He had saved Secretary Wu's life and effectively controlled General Ingram's illness. The Ingram family had already been making final arrangements, but now, it seemed a miracle was possible. Who wouldn't value such a doctor? Everyone gets sick. Dr. Shun was now, for all intents and purposes, the #1 unofficial physician to the D.C. elite. More exercise, less illness. Leo had been sticking to his daily routine, and he genuinely felt healthier. He used to get a stuffy nose whenever the weather changed, but since he started running regularly, that rarely happened. After their warm run, Leo and Stella chatted. He learned that the restaurant was a gift from her father, and he felt a little panicked. Should I invite your dad to the restaurant? I could make him my steamed fish. Stella smiled. Her father loved spicy food. Steamed fish probably wouldn't impress him. We'll see. Maybe when he gets back from his business trip, I'll have him and my mom come for a meal at the restaurant. Stella could sense his nervousness. This compromise seemed better. Leo immediately felt relieved. Okay, great. What do your parents like to eat? I can prepare in advance. My mom prefers lighter fare, but my dad loves spicy food. Leo made a mental note. After their run, they went to the student strip for breakfast, getting takeout for their roommates, stir-fried rice noodles for his, and Stella got something for Jessica. Stella felt that Jessica's situation was truly unfortunate. She had thought that with her mother's arrival, Jessica's financial situation would improve, but it hadn't. If anything, Jessica seemed to be working even harder now. Stella couldn't comprehend that kind of parenting. Her own mother, Victoria, could be difficult and demanding, but everything she did was, at its core, for Stella's benefit. What was the logic in spending millions on your daughter's painting, but then not supporting her? The saying, love is giving someone money, might be crass, but a more elegant version was that love is making someone happy, and that happiness surely included material comfort. To say you love your daughter, but not show it through care or financial support. Where was the love? It made Stella feel a rare pang of sympathy. Now, she often found herself grabbing a meal for Jessica, a habit she'd likely picked up from Leo, who was always bringing food back for his roommates. After breakfast, they went their separate ways. Stella had her own study schedule to keep to. They had tried studying together before. The results were not good. Leo returned to the dorm, fed his roommates, and then headed to the study lounge. He brought the two GRE studying NPCs, Wendy and Colin, some frost pears, and then continued to delve into the medical text his godfather had given him, starting with memorizing everything. He took notes on what he didn't understand and practiced his penmanship. When he was actively learning, Leo felt fulfilled and at peace. In those moments, time was worth its weight in gold. To master oneself is to find freedom. Epictetus. While Leo was studying, Sean made a quick appearance. He filmed a short segment without disturbing him, capturing the process of Leo reading, studying, and writing. He got a close-up of his handwriting. The goal was to be natural, real, and unposed. Yesterday, upon hitting 5 million followers, Sean had been filled with grand ambitions. But this morning, he felt it was better to stick to what worked. The current style was getting views, so he would just keep doing it, but with more care. He wouldn't get cocky and start messing with the formula. He'd seen too many accounts or businesses get successful, have a sudden brilliant idea, and ruin everything. Sean had noticed that scripted, dramatic content might get a quick spike in views, but it had a short tail. Unscripted, authentic slice-of-life clips might not go viral as quickly, but they had longevity. People kept watching, commenting, and liking them long after they were posted. Sean was beginning to understand a core rule of TikTok. Authenticity sells. People want to see a beautiful reality. Beautiful was key, but so was real. Capturing one of those elements could get you views. Capturing both could get you a viral hit. Beauty wasn't just about pretty scenery or good-looking people. It was about an inner quality, the feeling of friendship, of youth, things that weren't purely visual. He filmed the desk, the classroom, the other students studying, a real scene, not a set. He filmed the real Leo, who would occasionally make a mistake while writing and cross it out, twirl his pen, or even unconsciously chew on the cap. The corrections didn't matter. They were traces of his effort. The account had a certain energy, an energy Leo provided. He was learning, improving, working hard, and getting results. While filming the close-ups, Sean noticed that Leo's penmanship had gotten even better. His writing was more beautiful, with a certain elegant flair. He took several shots of it. The final shot was a wide angle, pulling back until Leo and the classroom blurred into a silhouette against the window with the trees outside. After filming, Sean left without disturbing Leo. He captured some footage of the academic building, the campus green, and the athletic fields, then waited for Leo's next move. Leo, after absorbing a mountain of pharmacology knowledge, looked up at the old wooden window frame. The first thing that popped into his head was a list of woods that could be used in medicine. If this were agarwood, it could be used to regulate qi and relieve pain. If it were sandalwood, its essential oil could be extracted to treat chest pain. If this were pine, the ash from its burnt wood shavings could be used as a styptic. It seemed like in traditional medicine, you could pick up any weed on the side of the road and use it as medicine. There was even a theory that within 100 paces of any poison, its antidote could be found. But in the modern world, you couldn't just use random plants. They were often contaminated with pesticides or chemicals. Right now, that's where Leo was. He had memorized the text, but he didn't fully understand it. It was enough to pass an exam, but not enough to treat a real patient. A patient doesn't get sick according to the textbook. The frost pears he'd brought for Wendy and Colin were a couple of the last ones from Jordan's mini fridge. a fridge he mainly used for his expensive cosmetics from a brief, ambitious phase of wanting to be a male beauty vlogger. The rest of the pairs have been shared among their dorm mates. Now that the fridge was empty, Jordan could have it back for his creams. In return for the pairs, Leo received 2 bottles of yogurt. He gave one to Sean. He'd heard somewhere that yogurt could help prevent depression. It seemed to be working. He wasn't feeling depressed. As he drank his yogurt, the system's voice chimed in. Host has diligently studied traditional medicine, analyzed with his mind, and earnestly practiced his penmanship. A hardworking person is the most handsome. Reward. Host has unlocked 30% of Thomas Jefferson's renowned penmanship. Leo felt pretty good about that. It was like a life simulation game where his own efforts yielded corresponding rewards. Let's go to the bookstore today, he said to Sean once he was done. It's closer. You won't have to lug your camera all the way to the library. Sean nodded, then hesitated. He scrolled through his phone and found a contact, Hannah Chun. They'd added each other, but had never spoken. When he first started college, Sean had been eager to make friends, adding everyone. He was a classic enthusiastic introvert. He'd make the initial effort, but had no follow-through. The contact had sat in his phone, a stranger he felt too awkward to delete. He typed out a message. My roommate is going to the bookstore to read in a bit. I was hoping to film him there. Would that be okay? Hannah replied almost instantly. Of course. I'm on the morning shift today. I'll make sure it's tidy for you. Just let me know when you're coming, and I'll clear it with my boss. Leo's plan to go to the bookstore was slightly utilitarian. He wanted to look at some cookbooks, hoping the system might reward him with a cooking skill he could use to impress Stella's father. The library didn't have many pure cookbooks. When they arrived, the friendly, round-faced clerk from their last visit greeted them with a smile. Feel free to film wherever you like, Hannah said warmly. Just try to be quiet and not disturb other customers. I spoke with my boss, and he said I could get you guys some coffee or tea. If you get tired, feel free to sit and rest. Just make yourselves at home. I gotta get back to work. Leo glanced at Sean's shy, pleased smile and thought, oh no, am I going to stop seeing Sean's favorability rating soon? But this classmate was incredibly skilled. Her enthusiasm was perfectly measured, polite, and respectful. She welcomed them, stated the rules, and offered them drinks. It wasn't expensive, but the gesture made all the difference. Then she actually went back to work, not hovering or watching them film. Sean hoisted his camera. His lens would occasionally drift toward the girl on the step stool, wiping dust from the high shelves. Your eyes can deceive you, but a camera lens rarely does. If a group of friends goes out and someone takes pictures, and most of those pictures feature one particular person, the camera has probably revealed the photographer's heart. Leo looked up from his book and smiled. He picked up a copy of the Illustrated Guide to American Regional Cuisine. Sean's heart beat a little faster, but he quickly refocused on his work. He didn't ask Leo to pick up some pretentious, intellectual book for the shoot. A cookbook might seem a little funny, but it was real. He knew people might criticize it online. What kind of college student reads a cookbook? So staged, but the subsequent videos would provide the context. If Leo was really going to run that restaurant, it was perfectly normal for him to research different cuisines. Forcing Leo to pose with a book he wasn't actually reading would be a waste of everyone's time. The difference between genuinely reading and just posing was visible in the subtle muscle movements of the face, the posture, the entire demeanor. Sean wasn't sure if his own skills had improved or if there was something different about Leo. But today, Leo's posture seemed more natural, more comfortable. He wasn't stiff, nor was he slouching. It was a perfect state of relaxed focus. It was the kind of thing that made you want to keep watching. Leo found a table and sat down. A cup of white tea appeared before him. Sean, filming Leo's intense concentration, also received the cup. Hannah was a good barista, but the coffee machine was loud. Not wanting to disturb their filming, she had opted for tea instead. It was just a simple tea bag, nothing fancy, but at the campus bookstore, a cup still cost $18. You were mostly paying for the seat. The seating was cozy, making the most of the small space. A ledge along one wall was covered with cushions, and the stairs doubled as benches. The corners were decorated with small plants and flowers. The bookstore was quiet in the morning. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing between the shelves. It was a beautiful sight. Books made the best backdrop, carrying an inherent sense of culture and beauty. Once Leo started reading, he tuned Sean out completely. Though his goal was practical, the process of reading couldn't be faked. He immersed himself in the text. Sean got the shots he wanted, capturing not just Leo, but the bookstore itself. And incidentally, Hannah. He was too shy to ask her directly, so he sent her a message. I got some shots that include you. I'll send them to you after I edit. If you're not comfortable with it, I won't post them online. Hannah didn't reply via text. Instead, she looked up from the counter and gave him an okay sign with her hand. She had a vibrant, generous energy. She was tall, and, while not beautiful by conventional, stick-thin standards, she was attractive. Her face was round, her chin soft. She was strong and moved with a swift, capable grace, able to carry a huge stack of books by herself. She never seemed to be idle. The owner must have loved her. She always had a smile on her face and was proactive, cleaning dust from high shelves no one else would notice and arranging fresh wildflowers she'd pick from the riverbank. Sean found himself noticing more and more about her. After he finished filming, he slipped out, bought a bag of apples, and left it for her at the counter before leaving. He still couldn't bring himself to say much in person. He sent her a text instead. "Thanks for your help. The apples are a small thank you. I'm heading out." Hannah couldn't exactly chase him down with the apples. She just replied, "Thank you. I love apples." Leo finished his book, stood up, and stretched. The friendly clerk had refilled his water and left 2 small cookies for him. "The cookies are from my own stash," Hannah said brightly. "Your roommate left a little while ago." She said it matter-of-factly and went back to work. At the same time, the system's voice chimed in Leo's head. "Congratulations, host, on your progress with the Silver Tier Bachelorette, Hannah Chun. Favorability, 69. Please continue your efforts. Hannah Chun, 23. Net worth, $12,000. Academics, 69. Appearance, 69. Professional skills, butcher, hereditary. Father is a professional hog butcher. She is strong, with excellent manual dexterity and a healthy appetite." Leo paused, processing the system's introduction. A butcher? He looked up at the cheerful young woman ringing up a student's drink order. He remembered the other girl from their last visit, the one who had burst into tears after a gentle reprimand from Hannah. This girl had remarkable restraint. Leo thanked her and went back to his book, focusing on Southern cuisine, looking for a good spicy dish. It seemed Dr. Croft also loved all things spicy, especially that artisanal beef jerky. The book he was reading was fascinating, delving into all sorts of tangents. He stumbled upon a section about the catering budget for cabinet-level officials, from $230 to $250 per person, and that was just for the raw ingredients. It didn't include the chef, transportation, or anything else. When a high-ranking official was on a tour, that was the standard for their box lunch, and everyone in their entourage received the same meal. Leo used his time dilation buff, but still didn't finish the book. His brain could only absorb so much before overheating. He leaned back in his chair, feeling tired. The cookies Hannah had given him helped. A little sugar goes a long way when you've been using your brain. He waited for the system's reward notification. When nothing came, he packed up his things. He tried to pay, but Hannah insisted it was on the house. As he was about to leave, she handed him a brown paper bag. "Hi, Leo," she said. "Your roommate gave me a bag of apples earlier. This is some pork jerky my family makes. It's really good. Could you please give it to him for me?" "I'm sure it is," Leo thought, nodding. He took the bag of jerky, which weighed about a pound. He was a little surprised she had a crush on him, especially since it seemed like Sean was interested in her. But it seemed to be just a normal level of favorability, nothing to worry about. As Leo left the bookstore, the system's voice finally sounded in his head. Host has diligently read the illustrated guide to American regional cuisine, with a particular interest in Southern food, known for its spicy, complex flavors. Reward: Host has received the skill for secret chili sauce making. Recipe: visible only to Host. It was the first time the system had given Leo a full recipe. It looked easy enough, the kind of thing you see once and think you've mastered. The main ingredients were peppers, 200 g of Fresno chiles, and 100 g of habaneros. The supporting cast: 80 g of minced garlic, 30 g of minced ginger, 1/4 of an onion, diced. How big an onion? 30 g of toasted white sesame seeds, and 50 g of crushed peanuts. Then came the soul of the recipe: 50 g of gochujang, 2 cubes of fermented red bean curd with 1 spoonful of its brine. How big a spoon? 20 milliliters of apple cider vinegar, and 40 g of brown sugar. Finally, the spice blend: 2 star anise, 3 bay leaves, and 5 g of fennel seeds, all toasted and ground into a powder. Leo realized that without the innate skill for making the sauce, the recipe alone was useless. What if your star anise was bigger than average? A little more of this, a little less of that, and the final product would be all wrong. Still, he was happy with the new skill. It was practical, and he loved spicy food. He carried the bag of jerky, and as it swung, he caught a whiff of its savory aroma. Worried he might be tempted to steal a bite, he tucked it into his backpack. He remembered his grandfather telling a story about a young man in their village who bought a box of cakes to bring to his potential in-laws. The cake smelled so good that on the way there, he couldn't resist and ate them all. Too embarrassed to show up empty-handed, he turned around and went home, and he remained a bachelor for the rest of his life. Before the after-class rush, Leo stopped by Lucky's and got 3 takeout orders with rice. The containers packed so full there wasn't an inch of empty space. Back at the Vance residence, Richard was staring at a hard, black frost pear. He'd had them before, years ago, during his travels. He'd eaten all sorts of things. This fruit was a real test of one's dental fortitude. Back then, he would just bite into it like an ice pop, a satisfying crunch that only someone with strong teeth could manage. He picked one up and took a huge crunching bite. His jaw immediately ached. Victoria didn't look directly at her husband as pear juice dripped onto his $2,000 t-shirt. Time was a cruel knife. The Richard of his youth had been handsome, a ringer for a young Aaron Kwok. Now, he picked his feet, slurped his noodles, and was generally unpleasant to watch. When you live with someone long enough, the illusion shatters. After demolishing the pear and ruining his shirt, Richard wiped his hands and face with a hot towel. "This is pretty good," he said. "Where'd you buy them?" "I want to send some to my friends." Victoria looked at him with a half-smile. "Your daughter's friend sent them. Is it good?" Richard's jaw really ached now. Seeing him unhappy made her happy. She was sipping her own pear juice through a straw, having let it soften. It was cool, sweet, and wonderfully natural. "My assistant told me you bought a private restaurant for your daughter's friend yesterday," she said. "The whole building, too. Didn't you say he looked too delicate, not very reliable?" Richard rubbed his aching jaw and slumped onto the sofa like a great python. "You judge a person by what they do, not what they say. Giving him a restaurant doesn't cost much. If I didn't, my daughter would just ask me for cash to spend on him anyway. Now he has a business to run. If he can't even manage a small private restaurant, then that's all he'll ever amount to. We'll see if he can maintain it, grow it, or run it into the ground. Your daughter has high standards. If he fails, she'll break up with him herself. No need for us to intervene." Richard said it smugly. It was a calculated risk, but one he could afford. It was a way to test the boy's character without causing a major incident. It took a lot of effort to be a good father. His daughter was strong-willed and proud. She hated being indebted to anyone. This gift both settled the score and provided a window into the young man's soul. Running even a small restaurant well is not easy. A person's character is the sum of their decisions. He didn't expect a college student to turn the place into a Michelin-starred restaurant. In his book, just keeping it running steadily without messing it up would be a passing grade. That sounds easy, but it's like the stock market. Just not losing money already puts you ahead of 97% of investors. As he walked back to the dorm, Leo was on the phone with Stella, completely unaware that the restaurant was a test from his future father-in-law. But for him, this test was easy. It was practically cheating. He had the enhanced palate buff, and his family was in the restaurant business. His own father had supported the family with a single signature dish. He knew the value of simplicity and quality. He told Stella his plan. Streamline the menu, focus on a few outstanding dishes, and keep costs down. He wasn't some rich kid who could afford to run a business at a loss. Stella listened, a smile playing on her lips. The more time she spent with Leo, the more she realized how simple he was, almost endearingly foolish at times. But with him, she felt safe. He told her he was almost back at the dorm and that they had a meeting to hand over the restaurant in the afternoon. He hung up, kicked off his shoes at the door, and slipped on his cotton slippers. He opened the door to a ravenous Jordan, who rushed forward. "My king, let me carry that for you. You must be exhausted." Leo handed the food to Jordan, then pulled the jerky from his backpack and gave it to Sean. "The clerk from the bookstore asked me to give this to you. She said her family made it." Sean scrambled to his feet, a little flustered, and smacked his head on the bottom of the top bunk with a loud thud. The sound alone was enough to make you wince. While they ate, Leo told Sean about his idea. They could film the process of taking over and running the restaurant. Even if they drove it into the ground, at least they'd get some great content for TikTok out of it. It was a win-win. Sean thought it was a brilliant idea. He'd seen a popular genre of videos on TikTok where people renovated dilapidated old houses. Even though the videos were long, people would watch the entire process, fascinated by the transformation. It was like those satisfying videos of blacksmithing or power washing. Humans have an endless fascination with the process of making things better. As long as the process was real, people would watch. Leo decided on a new routine: run and study in the morning, work at the restaurant in the afternoon. Jordan, shoveling spicy beef into his mouth, gasped for air between bites and gulped down water. "Count me in," he said, raising his hand. I'll even work for free. Just then, Alex pushed the door open. If Jordan works there for a month, he'll probably gain 10 pounds, he said with a grin. Who are you looking down on? Jordan declared proudly. With Leo's cooking, it'll be at least 20. Alex, ever the man about town, had already eaten, but Leo preferred eating with his roommates. After they finished, Sean shared the pork jerky. This is really good, Alex said, surprised. Spicy and a little sweet, and not tough at all. Where'd you buy this, Sean? Delicious, Jordan added, grabbing another piece. Leo tried one. It was true. It was much fresher than the pre-packaged kind, which often had the texture of cardboard. This jerky had a slightly sweet flavor, but the meat itself was high quality with a natural sweetness that came through as you chewed. It was a world away from the stuff that just tasted like seasoning. The butcher's family certainly knew their meat. Leo saw Sean's dark cheeks flush a little. A girl gave it to him, he teased. She said her family made it. You guys remember that girl from the bookstore who was crying? Sean's got a spring in his step, Alex said, excited. That girl was really pretty. Whoa, Sean, nice. Jordan added. No, not her, Sean stammered. It was the girl who made the other one cry, Leo clarified. Jordan scratched his head, not remembering. But Alex, of course, did. Oh, I remember her. Her name is Chun. Hannah Chun. She's in the student government. A really sharp, capable girl. Good people. Leo was impressed. Alex's memory for people was incredible. It was a true leadership skill. Imagine a boss who not only remembers your name, but also your positive qualities. You'd feel an instant surge of loyalty. Sean explained that the jerky was a return gift, that they'd known each other from a work-study program, and rambled on for a bit, unusually talkative. It was obvious to everyone that something was up. After chatting, they played a couple of rounds of League of Legends to relax. The key was not to play for too long and miss their afternoon nap. It was a test of self-control. After 2 games, Leo put his phone down. The others quieted down. When Leo woke up, Jordan and Sean were already dressed. Jordan was wearing a ridiculously loud, floral padded jacket he claimed was a high-fashion luxury item inspired by a designer's trip to rural China. Alex emerged in a matching set of silk pajamas. That afternoon, the roommates accompanied Leo to the restaurant. If nothing else, they provided strength in numbers. When they arrived, Stella was already there, and with her was Jessica Monroe. Stella had been worried about Jessica spending all her time cooped up in the dorm and had insisted she come along. On the way over, Stella had told her that she'd given Leo a restaurant and that he made amazing steamed fish. Jessica was a little numb. She felt guilty giving someone a single roasted sweet potato. Work harder, work harder, work harder, she told herself. The night before, the handover between Mr. Hayes' assistant and Mr. Vance's assistant had taken place. Carter, though supervised, had still tried to cause trouble. Furious and humiliated, he told the staff that anyone who left with him would get double their salary. When his father heard, he wasn't even angry anymore, just resigned. You're not sabotaging them, you idiot, he thought. You're paying a premium to give them a clean slate. You absolute moron. Mr. Hayes didn't intervene. Let his son be stupid. Mr. Lou, Stella's assistant, certainly didn't mind. More than half the staff left. They were just workers. They weren't going to turn down double the pay. So when Leo's group arrived, the restaurant was practically empty. Stella had always thought the place was overstaffed anyway. There were servers lurking behind every potted plant. It was unsettling. Fewer people was better. When Mr. Lou apologized for not being able to retain the staff, Leo was actually relieved. He had been nervous about managing so many people. Best of all, the rude waitress had left on her own, avoiding an awkward confrontation. The ones who stayed were the sensible ones who knew their young boss was unreliable. 3 kitchen staff, 3 servers, and 1 maintenance man remained. The huge old house suddenly felt spacious. The afternoon sun was beautiful, pouring down into the central courtyard in brilliant shafts of light. In the winter, a huge chunk of the old house's operating costs was the electric bill. The insulation was terrible. There was an open-air courtyard, and Carter Hayes had replaced several of the original wooden doors with massive, floor-to-ceiling glass panels that hissed open automatically. It looked sleek and modern, but it was in thermal nightmare. The central air had a blast-hot air non-stop just to keep the chill at bay. The electric meter spun like a top. Honestly, you had to thank the previous owner's profligate spending. Turning a historic house into a comfortable, modern space was an expensive endeavor. Carter had even added 2 new sets of restrooms. One was tucked under a staircase off the second main hall, with separate facilities for men and women. The other was in a newly constructed addition by the back entrance, a larger setup with 3 stalls in each, one of which included a shower. Besides the restrooms, the addition housed a supply closet the main kitchen, and a small staff dormitory. The dorm was basic, set up with bunk beds, just like a college dorm room. Most restaurants provided room and board for their staff. The hours were long, meal times were erratic, and the pay wasn't great. Covering living expenses was the only way employees could save any money. The design was actually pretty smart. It left the historic integrity of the main house intact. A smaller, secondary kitchen inside the house could be used for flameless prep, pastries, coffee, that sort of thing, which was safer in an old wooden structure. Of course, under lax management, cooks had probably still used the open flame stoves in there. The main kitchen, however, was in the new addition, accessible via a 6-foot-wide brick path that ran under a covered walkway. Out back, you could see a massive commercial pizza oven and the equally huge external unit for the central air system. The back lot was surprisingly spacious. Standing there, Leo felt a flicker of anxiety. He'd just taken over a business. Was it profitable or a money pit? For a place this big, what was the rent? Could they even break even? Then there were salaries. He mentally thanked Carter Hayes, that kind soul, for taking most of the staff with him and lightening that particular burden. Leo knew from his dad's old restaurant that rent was the biggest killer. He didn't know his parents had eventually bought their building. He remembered the clothing store owner next door constantly complaining that the landlord had raised the rent again, that she was barely making enough to cover it. Sean was ready to start filming. The first impression is always the most powerful, carrying a unique freshness. It gives the audience a sense of discovery, letting them notice details they might otherwise miss. A flower in a corner, a carving under the eaves, a small crack in a wall. So Leo decided to do a thorough walkthrough, starting from the main gate, with Sean's camera following his every move. The entrance was a high wall of dark wood, the original gate replaced by an automatic glass door. From the street, you could peek through and see the elegant greenery inside. Just past the door was a long, narrow foyer, maybe a place where carriages or horses were once kept. This led to what should have been a traditional hanging gate, but Carter had torn it out completely. Beyond that was an open courtyard, planted with a variety of flowers and shrubs like a small garden. Crossing the garden, you entered the first main hall. It was set up with a coffee bar and 3 tables for afternoon tea or a light meal. To the right of the hall, a covered walkway led to another courtyard. It was a bit of a maze. Leo pushed straight ahead. Past the first hall was a small, open-air atrium with 2 small tables, a designated spot for smokers. On either side of the atrium were wide, covered walkways, also lined with tables, positioned to take advantage of the beautiful window views. Through the atrium was a second, larger hall containing 2 small tables, a long communal table perfect for student groups, and a comfortable sofa area. A staircase here led to the second floor. The hall to the right of this one had a similar layout and led out to the back courtyard with the kitchen and restrooms. The whole right wing of the house was a series of private rooms alternating with small gardens, each with its own walkway seating. The second floor held 2 more private rooms, a public lounge, and the owner's private office and tea room. The ceilings upstairs were lower in some spots, tucked under the slope of the triangular roof. It wasn't grand, but the views were incredible. You could look down into the gardens below or out over the neighboring rooftops, a sea of dark slate tiles that was a rare sight in a modern city. Old houses like this usually had poor lighting, but Carter had spent a fortune on it, installing large glass windows and all sorts of modern fixtures. The electrical, plumbing, and heating systems were clearly a massive, expensive overhaul. The place was huge. The staff had mentioned the upstairs was usually only open on weekends. With only 3 servers, they'd be swamped otherwise. In the afternoon sun, every corner of the old house was beautiful. It had the weight of history, the feel of stories past, blended with modern floral arrangements and the golden light of the present. At night, though, it was a different story. The staff admitted they'd rather cram into the small dorm out back than stay in the main house after dark. It felt eerie. A house like this was great for a business, but to live in, you'd need a huge family. For a modern family with just 1 or 2 kids, it would feel empty, unsettling. Walt, Stella's driver and assistant, followed Leo on the tour. He noticed the young man seemed particularly interested in the former owner's private office. Walt had assumed Leo would head straight there to pore over ledgers and start issuing orders. Instead, Leo had handed the books to Stella and made a beeline for the kitchen. Carter Hayes' personal sanctuary was impressive. It was the most spacious room on the second floor, with a commanding view of the grounds below. The tea table was a magnificent piece of solid wood, clearly custom and expensive. The cabinets had been cleared of their rare teas and cigars, but the pricey-looking tea set on the table had been left behind. The surface was a mess of odds and ends, an ashtray, an incense burner, evidence of a businessman's little superstitions. A small painting of a bull, a symbol of a rising market, hung on the wall. The incense burner, with traces of ash, was likely for the bull. A half-used box of high-end sandalwood incense sat beside it. Carter Hayes really was rich, burning sandalwood for his Wall Street bull. Who knows if the bull appreciated the difference? Probably not. The ash wasn't fresh. It looked like he only lit a stick when he remembered. Carter had forgotten to take his good luck charm with him. The suite was divided into two areas, one with a large tea table, the other a lounge with a sofa and coffee table. There were dedicated, climate-controlled cabinets for wine, cigars, and tea. It was the classic setup for a rich kid's startup. The comfort of the owner was paramount, that of the customer, secondary. The room even had a private terrace. Outside, a small deck with weatherproof furniture and a large sun umbrella offered a perfect place to enjoy the sunset. By the time Sean finished filming, they were standing on that terrace as evening approached. It was the best seat in the house. The setting sun cast a crimson glow over the dark slate roofs, a breathtakingly beautiful scene. Sean panned his camera from the rooftops to the winter sun, its edges surprisingly crisp and clear, a perfect golden circle drawn against the sky. He capped the lens. Filming was over. Real life was about to begin. If Carter Hayes hadn't taken most of the staff with him, the restaurant could have opened for business as usual. The owner's presence or absence hardly made a difference, except that when the boss was around, you had to cook for him and his friends. 7 employees remained. A young guy served as the handyman and electrician, handling everything from wiring issues to watering the plants and running errands. 3 servers, 2 women and 1 man, all average-looking, had stayed on mainly because they were from nearby towns and didn't want the hassle of moving. The kitchen staff consisted of a head chef and 2 assistants. They were a tight-knit crew who hadn't gotten along with the other main chef, so they'd opted to stay. The younger, trendier baristas and pastry chefs, who were closer to Carter, had all left with him. That afternoon, Jordan took over the coffee bar. His family had a high-end espresso machine at home, a relic from his older brother's own failed entrepreneurial phase. His brother claimed he got it cheap from a friend whose cafe went under, but who knew? Jordan had a whole coffee station in his house. He once tried to show off his master barista skills and nearly gave his grandparents a heart attack with a round of super caffeinated espressos. His grandma was up at 3 a.m. for her morning power walk, and his grandpa was still wide awake at the same time. The restaurant bar was well-stocked, not just for coffee, but also with a wide array of liquors for cocktails, plus beer on tap. The pastries were delivered daily from an outside bakery, which explained why the in-house pastry chef was redundant. The chef who stayed, Chef Wu, saw this as his opportunity to finally step up. In the old kitchen hierarchy, he was basically the first assistant, handling prep and cooking during overflows, but the main dishes were always the other chef's responsibility. The kitchen operated like a surgical theater, and he'd only ever been the lead surgical nurse, never the surgeon. He was a talented cook, but lacked the fancy certifications and seniority. Leo, meanwhile, ignored the finances completely, handing the ledgers over to Stella and Jessica. They pored over the books, tracking daily expenses for groceries and supplies. The accountant, who had been sent by Carter's father, was gone, but the records were fairly clear. Stella quickly discovered that the restaurant's biggest expense, by far, was Carter's entertainment tab. He was spending nearly $3,000 a month wining and dining his friends. Factoring that out, the restaurant was basically breaking even or running at a slight loss. And that was without even considering the initial renovation costs or the rent. The food costs also seemed inflated. There was a huge amount of waste listed every day. Carter had insisted on using only the finest ingredients, free-range, organic pork at $12 a pound, for example, and had a strict policy against using anything that wasn't perfectly fresh. Anything in use by the end of the day was to be discarded, not served to customers, though staff could eat it. The principle was noble, but it opened the door for graft. It would be easy for the purchasing manager to bill for 10 pounds of pork by 8 and write off the other 2 as spoilage, pocketing the difference. Multiply that across organic berries, specialty vegetables, and everything else, and the losses added up. The restaurant was a money pit. Carter Hayes had easily lost over $100,000 on his little venture. The old saying proved true. The most expensive thing a rich man can buy for his son is a small business. Looking at the numbers, Stella finally understood why her father had so readily agreed to help Leo. She decided to let Leo run with it for now. He seemed so excited. If it failed, at least they still had the house. She made a mental note to get the deed from her dad. He'd definitely be holding on to it. Leo was, in fact, buzzing with excitement. Maybe it was in his blood. He, Sean, and Walt headed to the kitchen. Alex, meanwhile, had taken over the host stand. Dressed impeccably in a wool coat and tailored trousers, he looked born to be a maitre d'. His mere presence made you feel like you should be ordering a bottle of Pappy Van Winkle. He was currently charming the remaining servers, casually pumping them for information. Sometimes, you learn more from the staff than the owner ever knew. Leo believed the soul of a restaurant was its food. Without that, the most beautiful decor and the warmest heating were useless. If the food was good enough, people would line up on a freezing winter sidewalk or brave the sweltering summer heat to eat it. People's standards for food were higher now. With so many options, achieving that feeling of pure culinary bliss was harder, and people were willing to queue up or even fly across the country to find it. Food, after all, was one of life's fundamental pleasures. Walt had been instructed by Mr. Vance to keep an eye on this young man. He'd watched Leo tour the house, noting his interest in the owner's office, but instead of burying himself in paperwork, Leo had tossed the ledgers to Stella and marched straight into the kitchen. The kid had his priorities straight. The kitchen staff wasn't idle. The day's delivery needed to be prepped. They hadn't officially closed, and while it was quiet, a few regulars were expected for dinner. A handful of students might also wander in for afternoon coffee, but Jordan could handle that. The cafe was never very busy. The prices were steep, even for students from the prestigious Honors College. The menu on Yelp showed an average check of $15 for coffee and cake. A cup of coffee was $7, a slice of cake was $8. The light fare menu was even worse. A garden chicken salad for $10 with just some mixed greens, and the porcini and beef tongue rice for $12 was basically fried rice with a few mushrooms and bits of tongue. The steak was a whopping $35. In the kitchen, Leo looked over the menu. He tried some of the Western dishes before. They were photogenic but bland. Besides the steak, which was decent thanks to the quality of the meat, nothing was worth a second order. It was less a restaurant and more of a cafe that happened to serve food, a total waste of the gorgeous private dining rooms. The servers had been right not to seat him in one before. He couldn't have afforded it. He felt like you'd need to drop at least $200 or $300 just to justify sitting at those tables. Leo asked Chef Wu to cook his signature dishes for a staff meal. Then, he asked one of the assistants to help him. It was time to make his hot sauce. The chef, who had thought staying on was a safe bet after the last flaky owner, was now having second thoughts. This new kid seemed just as unreliable. He'd watched him casually hand a watch worth tens of thousands of dollars to his cameraman, then announce he was going to make hot sauce and want it all filmed. This was bad. The last owner was a spendthrift. This one was a show-off. It was 5 p.m. Jenna had been staring at her boss's office door for what felt like an eternity, counting the minutes until 6. She had dinner plans with her old college roommate, and if she left a minute late, she'd be stuck in traffic forever. Every time her boss was in the office, he'd wander out at closing time and say just a quick word, probably because he was lonely. Who wants a quick word after the workday is done? Though she and Zoe both worked in Bridgeport, they rarely saw each other. Once a month if they were lucky. They were each other's lifeline in a city that still felt foreign, a chance to vent about idiot bosses, annoying colleagues, and clueless clients before diving back into the grind. Sure enough, at 6:01, the boss emerged. He opened his mouth to speak, and Jenna's heart sank. But just as he was about to launch into his monologue, his phone rang. A lifeline. The call pulled him away, and Jenna grabbed her things and fled. She called a lift line to the restaurant they'd picked. The pictures online looked beautiful. She and Zoe took turns treating, and tonight it was Jenna's turn to choose. It was a private kitchen, quiet and elegant. The reviews were stellar, but it was a bit of a trek, located inside the Northwood State campus. Still, life was so monotonous. Working hard and pinching pennies wasn't going to make her rich, so why not treat herself once in a while? Zoe sat on the city bus, watching the impossibly young faces of the students getting on. Her college roommate had picked a restaurant for dinner, a place far out of the way. She was in a foul mood and had almost bailed, but she'd already agreed to go. She left early, giving herself plenty of time. Her mom had called earlier, urging her to move back home to take the civil service exam. Her aunt had already lined up a potential match, a nice boy from their town. Her mom's logic was that Bridgeport wasn't exactly New York City. It was basically the same as their hometown, so she might as well come back to where she knew people. But she had fought so hard to get out, to prove she could make it on her own. And so far, the proof was lacking. She was scraping by on a mediocre salary, living the same day on a loop. For the first time, she wondered if the things she was fighting for were worth it. Maybe she should just go home. She'd talk it over with Jenna at dinner. The one thing she truly loved about this city was the food scene. She loved spicy food, and the local cuisine was disappointingly mild. Some places even put ketchup in their spicy dishes. Sacrilege. The evening wind whipped past her face. She looked at the students, their faces full of hope, not yet beaten down by the real world. It must be nice. David Chung hadn't had time for lunch. A mid-level manager at a major elevator company, he was a graduate of a prestigious university who had started at the corporate headquarters. When the company decided to open a new branch in Bridgeport, he'd faced a choice: remain a cog in the machine at HQ or become a leader in a new city. He chose the latter. He'd spent years here buying a house, getting married, having a kid. He put down roots. Now, in his middle age, he was facing the same crisis as everyone else. The housing market had tanked. New construction had ground to a halt, and the elevator industry was hit first and hardest. He bought a McMansion at the peak of the market, putting down a 30% deposit when his salary and bonuses were through the roof. Now, the housing development was delayed, but the mortgage payments were due every month. His salary had been slashed, bonuses were a distant memory, and he couldn't sell the house without taking a massive loss. The company had laid off most of the branch staff. He was practically a one-man show, and he knew his turn was coming. He tried a few side hustles, making a small profit, which he'd promptly thrown into the stock market, hoping to change his fate. The market crashed. Every day, he watched his money disappear. He was losing his hair. He was at the university today to service an old account. He had personally overseen the installation of their elevators in several buildings years ago. Landing that contract had been a huge win, the highlight of his career. He'd been named Employee of the Year, received a six-figure bonus, and, in a fit of hubris, bought the mansion. Looking back, he wondered if that stroke of good luck had been a curse. With no new projects, client maintenance was all he had left. In the old days, he would have sent a subordinate. Now, he was the only one left. He inspected the elevators himself. Everything was in order. By the time he finished, it was dark. He thought about dinner and called an old friend, Greg, who was in a similar predicament. Greg had at least managed to move into his overpriced house. David's was an empty shell he couldn't afford to furnish, a financial black hole. His friend agreed to meet. It was last minute, which was bad form, but they were close enough not to care. He remembered a quiet private restaurant on campus, perfect for a serious conversation. In the kitchen, Leo focused on his hot sauce, while Chef Wu prepared his own signature dishes. The new boss wanted to taste his best work, so Wu made 5 or 6 of his most reliable recipes. People who work in restaurants rarely eat on a regular schedule. They eat before the rush or after, never during. They work through the afternoon, serving a few coffee and cake customers. Before the dinner rush began, they sat down for their own meal. Leo wasn't sure how his hot sauce would turn out, but he followed the system's recipe precisely. He had an assistant prep the ingredients, and he didn't try to hide the process from Sean's camera or the other kitchen staff. The technique was the secret, not the ingredients. Anyone can buy canvas and brush, but that doesn't make them a painter. The hot sauce was set aside to rest. The chef's dishes were ready. It was early for dinner, the sky not yet dark, but Leo called everyone to eat and taste the food. His verdict: the ingredients were fresh, but in terms of flavor, it wasn't even as good as the food from Lucky's on the student strip. The chef at Lucky's had a way with his wok, a mastery of heat and seasoning that produced an incredible, smoky flavor. Chef Wu's food was fine, a solid 7, 5 out of 10. You'd eat it, you wouldn't complain, but you wouldn't be thinking about it the next day. And for a restaurant this expensive and beautifully decorated, that was a fatal flaw. People come once for the ambience and the Instagram pictures. They only come back for the food. A restaurant's soul had to be on the plate, not in the decor. They finished their meal quickly. The first dinner guests were arriving. 2 parties, 2 young women and 2 older men. Alex handled them with effortless grace. The women chose a table in a cozy, plant-filled corner of the main hall. They were thrilled with the decor and immediately started taking pictures. The 2 middle-aged men requested a private room. Alex led them away. After the orders were placed, Leo felt a new resolve. These were, in effect, his very first customers. The kitchen had fresh fish. He would make his steamed fish. Tonight, every guest would receive a complimentary plate of steamed fish and a side of his secret hot sauce. Jenna and Zoe, both in their after-work attire, settled in. Jenna had changed into a dress in the office restroom before leaving. Zoe was in a cool leather jacket and jeans. They took turns snapping photos of the decor, of each other, and a few selfies. They made polite small talk while ordering. Since Jenna was treating, she took the lead. They were close enough that there was no awkwardness, no trying to pressure the other into ordering something expensive. It was just the 2 of them, and the night was more about catching up and taking pictures than the food itself. Jenna ordered one meat dish, a soup, and a vegetable side, plus 2 bowls of rice. Yelp had warned that the portions were small, but that was fine. They could have just grabbed noodles or something cheap. The real reason they trekked all the way out here was for the ambience, for a new backdrop for their social media feeds. She picked the cheapest options, seasonal stir-fried greens, a simple mushroom soup, and a modest chicken dish. In the private room, David Chung was operating on a different budget. He had once been a branch manager pulling in 7 figures, and even though his income had plummeted, old habits died hard. He rarely went out with friends anymore, the expense always looming in the back of his mind. But tonight, he ordered 2 main courses, meat and fish, plus a soup, a vegetable, appetizers, and a bottle of wine. Then came a conversation. When middle-aged men get together and don't talk about women or their kids, they talk business, which at the moment was a thoroughly depressing topic. As Greg arrived, looking heavier, his hair thinning, a cloud of defeat hanging over him, David felt a pang of regret. Maybe he should have just gone home to his wife and helped his kid with homework instead of paying to look at Greg's sad face. Since he'd issued the invitation, the bill was his. Still, the restaurant's atmosphere was undeniably nice. A lot of thought and money had gone into the decor. David, with his background in construction-adjacent fields, could appreciate the details. The server who took their order was also remarkably professional, his demeanor calm and confident. But the thought soured. If a guy this competent was working as a server in a restaurant, how bad was the economy? If he got laid off, he probably couldn't even get a job like this. He was too old, too proud. Alex, meanwhile, was just happy for the compliment. He seamlessly slipped into his role as maitre d', took their order, and then handed it off to the actual server. Jenna and Zoe chatted while they waited, their phones eating first as each dish arrived. The plating was beautiful, perfect for Instagram. They ate, complained about work, gossiped about old classmates. The food was ordinary, not as good as the pictures had led them to believe. Then, their server brought over a plate of steamed fish. "Compliments of the owner," he said, "and a side of our new house-made hot sauce." The fish smelled incredible. They thanked the server and dug in, half expecting it to be some frozen promotional giveaway. But it was astonishingly fresh, the flesh tender and flaky. Jenna felt like she was tasting fish for the first time in her life. Zoe, a spice fiend, was drawn to the vibrant red hot sauce. She spooned a generous amount on her rice. One bite, and it was like a dam breaking. Tears welled in her eyes. It wasn't just the heat, though it was spicy. It was something deeper, a feeling that washed over her. The spice was so intense, it demanded another bite of rice to quell the fire. In that moment, the pretense of the evening, the careful photos, the curated social media posts, all felt so exhausting. Her family's pressure, her uncertain future, everything was exhausting. She hadn't even had a decent spicy meal in ages. Suddenly, all she wanted was to go home. Seeing her friend crying, Jenna thought, is it really that spicy? She cautiously dabbed a tiny bit onto her fork with a piece of fish. An explosion of flavor. Savory, spicy, sweet, fragrant. It was a symphony in her mouth. It was so good it almost made her want to cry. An impulse seized her. Starting tomorrow, she wouldn't complain about her idiot boss. She would stop slacking off. She would work her ass off, crush her sales targets, and earn enough so she could come back here every single week. This feeling, this pure, unadulterated happiness, she hadn't felt it in so long. In the private room, David eyed the fish that had arrived. He'd ordered one just like it, and it hadn't been cheap. But their server, the incredibly distinguished one, explained that this plate was complimentary, a new recipe from the owner. A dish of the hot sauce was also on the house. They ate and drank, their conversation heavy with unspoken anxieties. The food was mostly a backdrop for the alcohol. It was fine, the kind of decent but unmemorable food you eat at countless business dinners. David gave a large piece of the complimentary fish to Greg before taking some for himself. He took a bite, and his eyes widened. This was different. He'd been to a share of Michelin-starred restaurants back when he was flush, eaten every kind of exotic fish imaginable. He wouldn't have even ordered this simple fish off a menu back then. But the flavor, it was sublime. He took another bite, then a sip of wine. He tried a hot sauce next. He used to love spicy food, but had gotten out of the habit. It looked fresh, though, and it was free. Why not? A jolt of heat and flavor awakened his palate, his mood lifting almost instantly. Across the table, Greg had stopped pontificating about the state of the world and was just eating, head down. They devoured the fish in minutes. David called the server back. "This fish. Can we order another one? And more of this hot sauce." The server returned a moment later, apologetic. "I'm very sorry, gentlemen. That's all we have. The owner only made a limited amount, and we're out of fresh fish for the night. I can bring you another dish of the hot sauce, but we don't have much of that left either." He placed a small dish on their table and departed. In the private room, David Chung and Greg practically licked the two small hot sauce dishes clean. They didn't have the nerve to ask for a third. But the sauce was like a drug. Once you tasted it, you were hooked. David had originally chosen the restaurant because it was on a quiet university campus, far from the usual noisy crowds. He hadn't expected the food to be anything special, but that steamed fish, they'd eaten it like a couple of starving animals without a word. And then they'd used their rice to wipe every last trace of hot sauce from the dishes. It was slightly embarrassing, but they were old friends. They both broke into laughter. Life certainly wasn't what it used to be. Greg's wife didn't work, his kid was in expensive private international school, and he still had 70% of his mortgage to pay off, a payment of over $3,000 a month. But he couldn't help but brag about his daughter. "The bilingual program is amazing," he slurred. "The kid's always running up to her teacher asking, 'What's this?' in English. Her accent is perfect. The $2,000 a month preschool tuition was worth it," he insisted, his voice thick with a mixture of pride and booze-fueled panic. By the end of the night, Greg was sobbing. David hastily paid the bill. To his surprise, their server had already arranged for a taxi and presented them each with a small bottle of milk to settle their stomachs and a couple of mints. He even offered a light spritz from a bottle of citrus-scented spray at the door to cover the smell of smoke. As David rode in the taxi, taking Greg home, his own mood had lifted. He called his friend, hoping to brainstorm business ideas, but Greg was too deep in his own mess to be of any help. Yet, the evening didn't feel like a waste. That fish and hot sauce were incredible. He'd never tasted anything that good, not even at the lavish corporate events during his peak years. It was simply delicious, and it made him happy. And the service. That young server was impeccable. Attentive, thoughtful, anticipating their every need. He'd never had such good service, not even at a five-star hotel. Suddenly, his own problems seemed smaller. If that young man could bring such excellence and dignity to his job, then he could do the same. He needed to stop dwelling on his past glories and start looking for new opportunities. This restaurant was a perfect example. It was unknown, but with food like that and service like this, he was sure it would be impossible to get a reservation soon. He felt a renewed determination to work hard, to succeed, so he could afford to bring more friends here. In the back of the car, Greg, half drunk, was still mumbling about the hot sauce. It was amazing. Usually, spicy food gave him terrible heartburn, but this was different. It was comforting, not harsh. He wasn't actually that drunk. He just couldn't afford to fight for the bill, so he'd let himself get wasted. He thought about his friend David. It had been a long time since he'd eaten a meal that good. Since the money dried up, his wife barely cooked for him, saving the good food for their daughter. Life couldn't go on like this. A man with no money had no voice, not even in his own home. Drifting in and out of consciousness, he kept thinking, that fish was so good. I have to come back. Maybe I'll get takeout for my wife and kid tomorrow. Jenna and Zoe had a wonderful dinner. After the catharsis of the hot sauce, Zoe finally told Jenna her decision. She was going to move back home. Jenna wished her well. As for herself, she was already planning her return. If she saved up, she could afford to come every weekend. It was a long drive, but worth it. They talked for hours. As they were paying, Alex overheard them discussing their shared Lyft ride. He discreetly arranged for a private car for each of them. "It's late," he said gently. "It's safer this way." Almost every guest that night received the complimentary fish and hot sauce, and almost every one of them left with the same thought: I have to come back. One diner from Guangzhou, who didn't touch the hot sauce, was still raving to his friends the next day about the best steamed fish he'd ever had in his life. His friends were skeptical. He was known for his hyperbole, but a few were intrigued enough to promise they'd check it out. It was day one. Leo and his friends had spent the entire afternoon and evening at the restaurant. When the rush hit, Stella, Sean, and Jessica all pitched in. Stella, it turned out, was a surprisingly skilled bartender, a skill her father had insisted she learn. If you're curious about fancy bars, he'd told her, learn to be the one behind the bar. It's safer. Sean helped out in the kitchen, and Jessica became a backup server. Alex owned the front of the house, greeting guests and managing the flow. Leo stayed in the kitchen, at the heart of the operation. After the last table left at 9, the crew cleaned up and sat down for their own late-night meal. Leo had saved one last fish, which he steamed to perfection. He also made a rich, savory soup. Only a tiny bit of the hot sauce remained. He'd thought he'd made enough for a week, but nearly every table had asked for a second helping. Chef Wu, who had been curious all night, finally got to taste what the new boss could do. He'd been too intimidated to sneak a taste earlier, but he couldn't help but notice that Leo seemed unimpressed with his own cooking. When the staff sat down to eat, Wu tried the steamed fish, the hot sauce, and a culinary tonic soup Leo had made for them, one that took too long to prepare for customers. At first, Wu was skeptical. The new boss was handsome, probably some TikTok influencer. What did he know about real cooking? But the aroma was undeniable. He took a bite of the fish, then a taste of the sauce, then a spoonful of the soup. Tears streamed down his face. The gap in skill was immense. He wasn't just a cook, he was an artist. The rest of the staff ate in a state of rapturous silence. Everyone had the same thought, thank God I stayed. Leo's roommates were already familiar with his god-tier steamed fish, but the hot sauce was new. Sean devoured 2 bowls of rice with it. Jordan alternated between licking his chopsticks and gulping milk. Alex elegantly dipped a bit of everything into the sauce. The tonic soup got mixed reviews. Alex and Jordan thought it was fine, while Stella and Jessica loved its complex, earthy flavor. Even Stella, who had been raised on the finest cuisine, was stunned by the fish. Walt, who was there to oversee things, also joined the meal. He was a man of routine and moderation, but after one bite of the fish, he forgot all about his diet and dug in. Jessica, the most experienced server among them, had been working in restaurants since she was a teenager. She knew the lifestyle was hard on your body. She'd just gotten over a cold and was feeling run down. She started with the soup. Whether it was a placebo effect or not, she didn't know, but after one sip, she felt a warmth spread through her, chasing the chill from her bones. Then she tried the fish. The delicate, sweet flesh and the savory sauce were a revelation. She could have eaten a whole bowl of rice with just the sauce. Then she tasted the hot sauce and silently spooned a generous portion onto her plate. It was all so delicious. She was amazed. Tonight, Leo had mentioned that his family was in the restaurant business. So he hadn't been kidding. Talent like this could be inherited. In that moment, she was truly envious of Stella. The remaining staff, the servers, the kitchen crew, the handyman, all felt like they'd won the lottery. With food this good, the restaurant was bound to be a success. And this new boss was different. The old one never lifted a finger and treated his friends like royalty. This boss's friends, who were clearly just as wealthy, worked right alongside them, without a hint of arrogance. In fact, some of them were more professional than the actual staff. They ate until they were stuffed, polishing off the last of the fish, the hot sauce, and the entire pot of soup. After a meal like that, everyone felt closer. They all agreed the menu needed a major overhaul. I can't really cook, Leo admitted. Just a couple of dishes. Chef Wu knew he was just being modest, trying to save his face. Compared to the boss, his own skills were nothing. He wasn't a prideful man. He was eager to learn. If he could pick up a few of the boss's techniques, he'd be set for life. So when Leo suggested changing the menu, he readily agreed. The staff handled the final cleanup. Leo and his friends piled into their cars to head back to the dorm. On the way, they were all groaning with exhaustion. Alex's step counter showed over 15,000 steps. Jordan's arms ached from making coffee. Only Sean, built like a tank, still had the energy to boil water for everyone back at the dorm. They were bone-tired, but their minds were racing. Lying in their beds, they chatted for a long time. Alex created a group chat, restaurant development and construction. The 7 of them, the 4 roommates, Stella, Jessica, and Walt, spent the next hour brainstorming. Should they keep the afternoon tea service? Should they switch to a fixed menu model? Jordan argued for keeping the coffee bar. There was a steady stream of students, and the profit margins on drinks were high. They could hire a student part-time to handle coffee and basic cocktails. Leo agreed. The main focus had to be the dinner menu. He liked the idea of a set menu. It would reduce waste and ensure freshness. They also needed a proper manager, someone like Alex, to run the front of the house. You couldn't have the son of the city's deputy mayor working as a host forever. This current staff, a factory heir making coffee, a billionaire's daughter mixing drinks, a TikTok star with 5 million followers cooking, a professional photographer washing dishes, and a seasoned hospitality veteran waiting tables, was ridiculously overqualified. Stella thanked everyone for their help and sent $1,000 to the group chat through Venmo, splitting it among the 7 of them. Even billionaires can't resist the thrill of free money. Leo got $200. Alex got $198. 36. Jordan got $166. 25. Sean got $130. 66. Walt got $100. 75. Stella herself got $148. 89. And Jessica got $55. 09. Even as the smallest share, it was a huge tip. She was happy. She'd been so busy all day, she hadn't thought about her mother once. It felt good to be this tired, this fulfilled. As Helen Keller said, The world is moved not only by the mighty shoves of its heroes, but also by the aggregate of the tiny pushes of each honest worker. Tonight, they understood what that meant. To do something, to do it well. Good night. Leo woke up at his usual time, but Sean was already awake, wrapped in a blanket and hunched over his laptop. Morning, Leo mumbled, still groggy. He glanced at Sean's screen. Editing the restaurant video, Sean said, "I've never done this kind of content before. Not sure if my followers will like it. I'm watching tutorials on different editing styles." Leo patted his shoulder. "Don't stress about it. Just do your thing." Sean nodded, but his eyes were glued to the screen. An open bag of pork jerky sat on the desk, his work fuel. Leo headed out to wash up. The hallway was frigid, the cold air a slap in the face that woke him up instantly. The water in the washroom was ice cold. He knew the girls on campus usually brought a thermos of hot water to mix with it. The conditions at Northwood State were pretty Spartan. Students were always complaining about how other universities, hell, even their own honors college, had private bathrooms, AC, and hot water. He'd actually brought this up with Dean Roberts during a game of spades once. The dean's response was classic administrator speak. "If conditions are too comfortable, the kids get soft," he'd said. "They won't be able to handle the real world. College is about learning life skills, not just academics. If they can survive four-person rooms and communal bathrooms, they can survive a tough job market." It sounded like a load of crap, a convenient excuse for not spending money, but Leo had to admit there was a grain of truth to it. After this, sharing a crappy apartment with a couple of roommates after graduation would feel like a luxury. Leo splashed the icy water on his face. He'd never bothered with things like face wash or sunscreen until he started dating Stella. Jordan had insisted, explaining that if you wear sunscreen, you have to use a cleanser to get it off. And if you use a cleanser, you need a moisturizer. It was a whole conspiracy. Jordan had a mountain of product samples and happily shared them with the entire dorm. Leo had to admit his skin was much better now, smoother, clearer. It was probably also due to the running and the honey water he drank every morning. He glanced at his reflection in a cracked mirror someone had propped up on a shelf. For that one moment, water dripping from his chin, he felt like the most handsome guy in the world. He struck a quick pose, then headed back to the room. Alex was awake. He'd started wearing a fitness tracker to monitor his sleep, which, ironically, seemed to be making him wake up earlier. He checked his stats, a sleep score of 79. 6.5 hours, with only an hour and a half of deep sleep. He'd woken up once in the middle of the night, needing the bathroom, but had forced himself back to sleep rather than brave the cold. Now his bladder was screaming. The late, heavy dinner last night had thrown off his carefully curated wellness routine. Seeing Leo, fresh and awake, and Sean, already deep in work, Alex decided to get up. Jordan was still dead to the world, an eye mask on, his comforter wrapped around his torso while his legs stuck out, looking like the giant snake from a fairy tale. "Going for a run," Leo said. He had a standing date with Stella. "I'll come with," Alex said. They got dressed. Alex didn't own much athletic wear. In a tracksuit, he looked less like an athlete and more like a government official trying to go incognito. As they left, Jordan just rolled over in his sleep. They met Professor Reed at her usual spot and started stretching. "So, did you meet her parents yet?" Professor Reed asked Leo. Leo blushed. "Not yet, Professor. I took over a restaurant on the students' trip. I want to get it running smoothly, then invite them for a meal there." Professor Reed chuckled. "Smart move. Home field advantage. You'll be more comfortable on your own turf." Alex suppressed a smile. The restaurant was a gift from his future father-in-law. Some home field advantage. This guy was playing a whole different game. He wondered if it was a test. The Van Cess were a serious family. A gift like this wasn't just a casual gesture. But he kept his thoughts to himself. Leo had a rare kind of sincere, straightforward intelligence. You didn't want to mess with that. Besides, helping Leo always seemed to pay off in unexpected ways. "Professor, if you ever want to eat out, just let me know," Leo offered. "I'll save you a table. If the food is as good as that steamed fish you made, I doubt I'll be able to get a reservation," she said with a laugh. "For you? You'll always be at the front of the line." They said their goodbyes and headed toward the main athletic field to meet Stella and Jessica. Professor Reed watched them go. Her first instinct had been to warn the boy not to get distracted from his studies. But he was young. He had time to try things, to make mistakes. And who was to say running a restaurant wasn't a worthy path? She'd lived long enough to know that interfering in other people's lives was usually a mistake. They met the girls, and the four of them started a slow jog toward the track. Alex was already breathing heavily. Jessica, though she was on her feet all day at work, wasn't used to cardio. The exhaustion of labor wasn't the same as exercise. Stella, on the other hand, ran with perfect form. Her father had hired a professional coach for her when she was younger, worried she might injure herself or develop bulky leg muscles. Leo, who usually kept pace with Stella, slowed down to help the others. He corrected Alex's posture and showed Jessica the proper breathing technique. From a distance, Stella watched him, patiently guiding her friend and his roommate. The morning sun caught him, making him seem to glow. After a few minutes of instruction, Alex and Jessica were running more smoothly. They fell into a comfortable rhythm, for figures circling the red track. Jessica noticed that the usual stitch in her side didn't appear. Leo's breathing trick was working. Alex, ever conscious of his health, was grateful. His family had a saying, "The length of your life determines the length of your political career." Staying healthy was a strategic imperative. After their run, they walked to the student strip for breakfast. Stella and Jessica's friendship had deepened recently. The other night, after Jessica's mother had left, Stella had found her shivering in her thin bed. She dragged her own comforter over, and they'd stayed up late talking, eventually falling asleep in the same small bed. A strange and sudden intimacy for years in the making. They chose a small, no-frills diner that served classic breakfast food. The place was packed with students grabbing a quick bite before class. Alex went to order while Leo and Stella sat at a small table, playfully intertwining their fingers. Over donuts, coffee, and bacon, they strategized about the restaurant. Leo listened as everyone pitched in ideas. Jessica, with her years of experience working everywhere from basement food courts to Michelin-starred restaurants, offered practical advice about staff management and setting clear expectations. Alex, a natural leader who'd run half the clubs on campus, talked about organizational structure. Leo knew his own weakness was in management. His strength was in the kitchen. He'd absorbed their ideas and passed them on to Walt to implement. He tore off a piece of glazed donut and dipped it into his coffee. The key to delicious food was simple: fresh ingredients, good technique, and a satisfying contrast of textures. As he savored the bite, the system's voice chimed in his mind. Host has completed a morning run and successfully taught 2 companions basic running form and breathing techniques. Received sincere gratitude from companions. Reward: height plus 0.2 cm. Applicable to any body part. Leo, all 5'9". 1 inch of him, stood up and grabbed 4 more donuts from the counter. A guy his size needed the extra calories. Alex, feeling invigorated from the run, grabbed another one too. Stella and Jessica split one. After they'd eaten, Alex, who had already paid, picked up a bag with 2 more donuts for their sleeping roommates. On the walk back, Leo looked at Jessica, who seemed as cheerful and determined as ever, completely unfazed by her mother's visit. "You're always so optimistic," he said. "How do you do it?" She thought for a moment. "When I was a kid, our school required us to buy a new pair of running shoes for gym class. My dad couldn't afford them. I remember hiding and crying about it. Then I saw a homeless man on the street corner. He didn't have any feet. He was begging on his knees. And I realized how lucky I was. I just didn't have shoes. Some people don't even have feet. I knew I could work hard and earn money for shoes. But no matter how hard he worked, he could never grow new feet." Carter Hayes couldn't believe it. The new owner hadn't even closed for a day to regroup. He'd just kept the restaurant open. That place was his baby. He'd hired the designer, overseen the renovation of the historic house, personally chosen the plants. Everyone who came and took pictures. It hadn't turned a profit yet, but he was sure it would have, given time. It would have proven he had real business talent. But his father had cut him off. And when the old man gave an order, you listened. He'd been forced to sell the horse ranch, too. He'd taken the huge payout from that sale and immediately bought out a bookstore and a steakhouse next to each other on the lakefront side of the student strip. He was going to gut them both and build something even bigger, something that would really show them all. His father, meanwhile, was busy trying to do business with Richard Vance, oblivious to his son's new project. He'd forgotten the fortune teller he'd consulted at the beginning of the year, the one who'd warned him of financial losses and family strife in the winter months. Jessica Monroe was young enough to still believe she could fight her fate. After learning her mother was alive, something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt the need to hide her background. She could never fake being a socialite anyway. Letting go of that burden was a relief. Her feelings for Leo had changed, too. She recognized now that her old crush had been a little pathetic. She'd been like a shy, insecure guy secretly obsessing over a girl way out of his league. There was nothing wrong with admiring beauty, but it had to be healthy. It was like worshiping the god of wealth. You hope to become wealthy yourself, not to sleep with the deity. She now saw Leo as an inspiration, a role model to help her improve. That memory of the homeless man was old, but still sharp. She didn't even like apples anymore. The texture bothered her. but she could still remember the sweet, fragrant taste of the one he'd given her that day, a small kindness in a moment of despair. Leo and Alex dropped their breakfast bags at the dorm, grabbed their books, and headed to their usual study spot in the library. Only one of their fellow regulars was there. Wendy Liu, her study partner, Colin, was a junior and still had classes. Leo's relationship with Wendy had evolved from silent nods to quiet greetings and the occasional sharing of snacks. "My ex asked to borrow money today," she said suddenly, after they'd exchanged hellos. I said no. Leo was taken aback. He wasn't exactly a guidance counselor. He forgot I still have access to his Amazon account, she continued, a strange mix of sadness and triumph in her voice. He bought his new girlfriend the latest iPhone on an installment plan and couldn't make the payment. In that moment, I realized I was never really heartbroken over him. I was just angry that I'd been deceived. Saying no to him, it actually felt good. Leo gave her a thumbs up. He understood. It was like getting a text from an ex asking you to click their link for a shopping app discount. Any lingering romantic feelings evaporated instantly. "How's the GRE prep going?" he asked, changing the subject. "It's going well," she said, her tone brightening. "I feel less anxious lately, more focused. And I have you to thank for that. Watching you work so hard made me realize I was just wasting time pretending to study. Now I'm actually getting things done." Her earnestness made Leo feel a little shy. He just smiled and opened his book. As he did, the system's voice echoed in his head. "Congratulations, host. You have made progress in conquering the silver-tier single woman, Wendy Liu. Affection level has reached 80. She now views you as an idol and a role model. Your achievements will increase her loyalty. Please continue your efforts." Leo was stunned. All he did was show up and study. They barely talked. He had no idea her affection level was so high. He didn't sense any romantic interest from her, but there was a definite hint of reverence in the way she spoke to him. He'd never understand women. Still, reaching 80 meant a new attribute point. He allocated it to appearance. Right now, the trophy husband route seemed to be the most profitable. He checked his stats. The trophy husband system host. Leo foster attributes. Physique, 8. 3 out of 10 intellect, 8. 4 out of 10 vibe, 8 out of 10 integrity, 8 out of 10 appearance, 8. 2/10, body shape +1, posture +1, lifespan, 21/70, 1/110. The increase in appearance wasn't about his face suddenly becoming more handsome. It was a holistic improvement. His posture was straighter, his physique more defined. He was becoming more attractive in a way that was approachable, not intimidating. He settled in to study. His greatest skill now was his ability to focus. The moment he sat down and opened a book, the world faded away. Meanwhile, a popular TikTok creator who went by the name Kai on his channel, The Uptrend, had just posted a new video. He specialized in analyzing viral accounts. Normally, his voiceover began over slick graphics and charts. "I only break down accounts with at least 10 million followers." But today, we're looking at an exception. The Roommate chronicles an account with just 5 million. Now, before you start complaining, you need to see its growth trajectory. This account went from 0 to 5 million in just a few months, and it's still climbing. I'm telling you, 10 million is a sure thing. The video cut to a detailed analysis, showing graphs of the account's follower growth, audience demographics, and engagement rates. "I'll admit, at first, I didn't get it," Kai continued. "It's just a college kid's daily life. Running, studying, reading. Why does this have 5 million followers? I've spent weeks studying this account, and I've broken its success down into 3 key elements. 1. Consistency. He posts every single day. 2. Aspirational skills. This isn't just any college student. He's an equestrian, a team master, a painter, a chef. But here's the secret sauce, the thing you can't fake. It's not just about the skills, it's about the progress. It's a growth narrative. I went back and looked at the very first videos. I took screenshots of his handwriting in his notebook from months ago and compared them to now. It has visibly improved. His posture, his style, even the quality of his clothes. Everything is on an upward trajectory, and that creates a powerful sense of investment for the viewer. You feel like you're part of his journey. You're not just a follower. You're a supporter, watching him level up in real time. This isn't just a viral account. It's a masterclass in audience cultivation. Mark my words, this account is going to be huge. The video went viral. A flood of new followers, all referencing the uptrend, poured into Sean's account. He was baffled. He'd been struggling with how to edit the new restaurant footage, but now he just decided to stick with his usual style. The title of his new video was simple. A college student who doesn't want to be a chef is not a good boss. On TikTok, Leo was building a culinary empire. In real life, he was deep in a textbook, happily lost in the world of medicinal herbs. After a long, intense study session, Leo's brain felt like it had short-circuited. He stared blankly out the window at a row of sparrows perched on a telephone wire, looking like they were recharging. He chugged a yogurt drink, then went for a walk to clear his head. He wandered past the lecture hall, the professor's voice booming. The students in the front were attentive. In the back, it was a familiar mix of sleeping bodies, hidden cell phones, and dog-eared novels. It was like looking at a ghost of himself. He finished his yogurt, arced the empty bottle perfectly into a distant trash can, and headed back to the library. His brain felt full, like a computer with no RAM left. He said goodbye to Wendy Lou and left, the system's voice congratulating him on another productive session. Host has diligently studied medical and logistical knowledge. Reward: intermediate culinary tonic skill. The tonics produced will have one of two random effects. 1. Incredibly delicious, but with no medicinal properties. 2. Tastes mediocre, but has powerful medicinal effects. Interesting, Leo thought. Maybe I should ask Dr. Shun for a kidney-boosting recipe. For the future. He walked toward the student strip, his mind still fuzzy from using the time dilation buff. He'd only been studying for 2 hours, but it felt like a full workday. He was going to pick up Moose for his afternoon walk. When he got to Paige's apartment, the place was a disaster zone. Ribbons, doggy dresses, and tiny sweaters were strewn everywhere. Moose, clearly bored and destructive, greeted him with an enthusiastic leap, planting his paws on Leo's shoulders. Leo pushed the big dog off, ruffled his bald-looking head, and navigated the obstacle course of canine couture to get outside. He could understand now why Paige was always playfully punching the dog. He made a mental note to ask her if he could bring Moose to the restaurant. The backyard there was huge and fenced in. He sent Paige a text, but she didn't reply. Probably asleep. Leo and Moose stopped at the breakfast burrito cart. As they waited, a couple of girls walking by gasped. They had just been scrolling through TikTok and recognized the scene instantly. It looked even better in real life. They whispered, snapping pictures. The guy's back was even broader, his posture more perfect than in the videos. The dog was a bit fatter and balder in person, but the whole tableau, man and dog waiting patiently for their food, was ridiculously charming. The cart owner, seeing the cameras, sucked in his gut and plastered a cheesy grin on his face. Leo got his burrito, and Moose got his sausages. They walked down to the lake, ate their respective meals, and then Leo took Moose back to the apartment before heading to the campus bookstore. He needed to do some recipe research. The bookstore was quiet and cozy. Hannah-chun was working the morning shift. He gave her a nod and ordered a tea. "I'd recommend the Salon," she said. "It comes with a small glass of fresh, local milk. It's really good." He took her suggestion and settled down with a stack of books, a glossy dessert cookbook and a more academic-looking volume titled Taste of the Gilded Age. Hannah brought his tea, along with 2 small cookies. The tea itself was standard tea bag quality, but the milk, as she'd promised, was rich and creamy. It reminded him of the fresh milk he used to get from a local dairy as a kid. He was struck again by how good she was at her job. Her small, personalized recommendation made him feel like a valued customer. He poured the milk into his tea, which softened the tea's astringency perfectly. He flipped through the dessert book, but quickly lost interest. The recipes seemed overly complicated and cloying. He did, however, pause at a recipe for a simple, old-fashioned chicken cake, a light, fluffy sponge cake. It looked easy enough. Maybe he'd try making it for Stella. He spent the rest of the afternoon engrossed in Tastes of the Gilded Age. The book was fascinating, tracing the history of American cuisine through historical documents and the dining habits of famous figures. He read about the introduction of new ingredients from abroad and the evolution of classic dishes. Time flew by. He hadn't even noticed that someone had refilled his water 3 times. When he finally looked up, his back was stiff. He decided to buy the history book and head to the restaurant for lunch. As he was putting the dessert book back, he overheard a conversation from the next aisle. It was the bookstore owner talking to Hannah. "Listen, Hannah," the owner said, his voice low. "You've been great, really. A hard worker, and the customers love you. But I'm closing my other location at the Honors College, and I got to move my full-time senior staff over here. I just don't need as many people anymore. Don't worry, I'll pay you for every day you've worked at the full-time rate." Hannah was clearly surprised, but her reply was poised. "I understand, sir. I'll just pack up my things. I've reorganized the tea and coffee display. I'll send you a diagram. If you can't find anything, just let me know." Just then, the other part-time employee, a prettier, more popular girl, sauntered over. "Oh, Hannah," she whispered cattily as Leo approached the counter. "Did he let you go? He's keeping me, you know." See? Working hard doesn't get you anywhere. Hannah ignored her and turned to Leo with a professional smile. This copy is the floor model. Would you like a new one? No, this one's fine, Leo said. He hesitated for a second, then added, Hannah, if you're looking for work, I'd like to offer you the position of general manager at my restaurant. We need someone as capable and detail-oriented as you. Here's our card. You can talk to Sean. He can answer any questions. He said a thank you for the pork jerky, by the way. The whole dorm loved it. Hannah's cheerful facade crumbled for a fraction of a second. Her eyes glistened, and her hand trembled slightly as she handed him the book and his receipt. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Does the position offer internship credit? Absolutely, Leo said with a smile. I'll finish my shift here, and then I'll head right over, boss, Hannah said, her confidence returning. The title boss felt strange to Leo. He grabbed his book and made a hasty exit. Hannah was definitely an extrovert, a real people person. It made sense. You couldn't be shy if your family's business involved wielding a butcher's knife. He immediately texted the group chat. Jordan, yes. Sean, ask her if she can get more of that pork jerky. Alex, thumbs up. Hannah seems reliable and has a much better personality for customer service than I do. Strong hire. Sean, she's a hard worker. Alex was right. Leo wasn't an assertive personality. A seasoned, cynical restaurant manager would walk all over him. Hannah was perfect, smart, hardworking, and eager to learn. She was a blank slate. It was always easier to draw on a blank slate than to erase and redraw an existing picture. As Leo walked, the system chimed in again. Host has diligently studied culinary arts and the cultural history of food. Reward, intermediate skill, make a delicious chicken cake. The cake will taste ordinary upon first bite, but will leave the eater with a profound sense of happy regret, or perhaps regretful happiness. Is a lifetime of marriage more important than a delicious, belly-filling cake in the here and now? Different people will have different answers. Host has learned of the historical practice of mixing Lanchua tea into milk. Host may now experiment with adding his own brewed tea to milk to create unexpected flavors. The system was in a weirdly random mood today. He got back to the dorm just as Dr. Croft texted him. Did you forget you owe me a painting? Leo winced. He had completely forgotten. He also owed General Ingram a portrait. He sheepishly texted back, working on it. Dr. Croft was probably just as guilty. A client had likely reminded her, and she was passing the pressure down the line. His roommates were waiting for him. They all drove over to the restaurant, meeting Stella and Jessica there for staff lunch. Chef Wu's cooking had improved slightly. Maybe he was less nervous. It was now a solid 7. 6 or 7. 7. After the meal, they all voted on their favorite dishes to help refine the menu. Walt, who had initially been unenthusiastic about his new assignment, was now eagerly anticipating every meal, especially dinner. He, a man who had seen the world with Richard Vance, had never tasted anything as good as Leo's steamed fish. And the hot sauce, it had awakened a love for spice he never knew he had. Just as they were finishing lunch, Hannah arrived. She had assumed Leo's offer might have been a joke, but she came anyway. The first person she saw was Sean, camera in hand. He blushed, the color hidden by his dark complexion. That pork jerky was really good, he stammered. My roommates were wondering if you had any more. Hannah smiled, understanding his awkwardness. Of course. My dad makes tons of it. I'll have him send another package. The others welcomed her warmly. Stella and Jessica had been curious about the new manager Leo had hired, half expecting some impossibly glamorous and intimidating woman. Hannah, with her cheerful, unassuming demeanor, was a pleasant surprise. Leo, oblivious to the minor drama his hiring had caused, tied on an apron and headed to the kitchen to make more hot sauce. He was wearing a new outfit, a comfortable, loose-fitting set of dark blue linen pants and a matching tunic that Jessica's cousin Shelley had bought for him in D.C. It was the kind of thing a traditional doctor might wear, practical and professional. Sean thought it looked great on camera, especially against the backdrop of the beautifully designed kitchen. While Leo worked, the phone started ringing. Hannah, without any training, seamlessly stepped into the role of reservationist. Her phone voice was warm and melodious. She expertly fielded calls, asking about party size, dietary restrictions, and special occasions, then charmingly explained their new set menu concept. She even gave callers tips on the best way to get to the restaurant, suggesting they take the scenic campus shuttle. Walt listened in, amazed. The girl was a natural. He had half a mind to poach her from Mr. Vance's office. The restaurant was starting to get busy. Alex was on the phone, trying to secure a more reliable source of fresh fish than the local fishing club. Jessica, a veteran of the service industry, found herself impressed by Hannah's innate skill. Jessica's own style was one of polished, high-end professionalism, honed in Michelin-starred restaurants. She could make a $20 meal feel like a $200 experience. Hannah's gift was different. It was a genuine, disarming warmth. Leo, having finished the hot sauce and started a large pot of chicken and mushroom tonic soup, moved to the open pastry kitchen near the coffee bar. He was going to try making that chicken cake. It was a simple, traditional recipe: flour, sugar, eggs, milk. The trick was in the ratios and the technique. As he worked, carefully whisking the batter, Sean filmed from a discreet distance. Stella, who had been trying to read in a corner, found her eyes repeatedly drifting toward the bar, a small, happy smile playing on her lips. The aroma of the baking cake began to fill the room, just as the first dinner reservation arrived. A woman in the party sniffed the air appreciatively. "Wow, that smells incredible. My sense of smell has been weak ever since I had COVID. What is that? Can we order some?" That evening, they had 4 tables of returning customers, 3 tables of guests who'd been sent by the previous night's diners, and 4 tables of curious fans who had seen Sean's latest TikTok and wanted to see the place and its new owner for themselves. 11 tables in total. It was a full house. Leo hadn't intended to serve the chicken cake or the milk tea to customers. He made them for Stella and the crew. But with guests arriving early, plans changed. He quickly plated a slice of the warm cake and a small cup of the milk tea and, playing the part of a handsome chef, delivered it to Stella's table himself. An older woman, who had come with a friend after seeing the TikTok, watched the exchange with a delighted smile. She was a recent widow, living comfortably on her pension. Her daughter had warned her that the internet was full of fakes and that she was probably being scammed, but she had insisted on coming. And there he was, the charming young man from the videos, even more handsome in person, gently explaining the menu to a customer. "It was real. I just made this," Leo said softly to Stella. "Let me know what you think." She took a sip of the milk tea. It was unsweetened, the creamy milk perfectly balancing the bitterness of the tea. It was nothing like the cloyingly sweet bubble tea she'd had with her friends. Then she tried the cake. It was warm, fluffy, and had a strange, complex flavor she couldn't quite place, sweet, but with a hint of something tangy. She finished both in minutes. Dinner service was a whirlwind. Leo, now more confident in the kitchen, orchestrated the flow of dishes with surprising ease. As he worked, a thought struck him. His mother had always told him to study hard, so he wouldn't end up stuck in a hot kitchen like his father. And yet, here he was, and he was happy. There was a simple, immediate joy in creating something delicious with his own hands. Stella, not wanting to be idle, came into the kitchen to help, content to just be near him. As the guests were seated, Hannah's genius was on full display. She had remembered the names of every person who had called for a reservation. "Ms. Davis, welcome," she'd say warmly, and the guests would light up, surprised and pleased. She seated the Instagrammers at the most picturesque tables, the businessmen in the most private rooms, and the 2 older ladies in a lively spot in the center of the hall. Alex, in a perfectly tailored suit he'd been saving for a special occasion, moved through the dining room like a seasoned pro, confirming dietary needs and explaining the set menu. Jessica was a vision of grace, her movements precise and elegant as she served water and took drink orders. Before the main courses arrived, each guest received a complimentary small cup of milk tea and a miniature chicken cake. The old woman who'd come to see Leo tried the cake first. The taste was instantly familiar, transporting her back to her childhood, to the first time her uncle had brought a box of these cakes from the city. They hadn't been this soft or fragrant back then, of course, but the memory was potent. The guests who had been lured by promises of the best steamed fish ever were not disappointed. The tonic soup received mixed reviews. Some found it a bit bitter, but the milk tea and cake were a universal hit. The returning customers asked if they'd hired a new chef. The new customers thanked their friends for the recommendation. And the TikTok fans, who had come looking for a celebrity, left as devoted foodies. One woman with an $8,000 a month pension thought the prices were too low and worried the restaurant would go out of business. Another guest, a friend of David Chang's from the night before, tried to buy a gift certificate for future visits. The only complaint was about the medicinal taste of the soup. But later that night, many of the guests noticed they felt unusually energetic, less fatigued than normal. The older woman noticed that the indentations her socks usually left on her ankles were gone. Her swelling had disappeared. The soup, it turned out, was more than just soup. After the last guest had left, the crew sat down for their own well-deserved meal. Walt finally got his fish. He also managed to snag the last piece of chicken cake. The taste reminded him of the sweet, sticky rice cakes his mother used to make. He ate and thought, and wondered how he was going to explain the 10 pounds he was about to gain on his expense report. Hannah ate in happy silence, feeling like the luckiest person in the world. Stella worried she was going to gain weight. Leo, his palate now enhanced by the system, was already thinking about how he could make the dishes even better. And Alex, looking elegant even as he devoured his third helping of fish, thought that this was a good test of his willpower. After food this good, he'd be immune to any lesser bribes that might come his way in his future political career.